Hello everyone, good day and welcome to today's workshop on grid-scale battery energy storage system best practices. My name is Ari Kellenson and I would be the moderator as well as session chair for this event. As you guys know, this is a 2 days event that has 3 sessions, session A, B, and C. I'm just gonna wait about 5 minutes or so because I see there's a lot of attendees that are registering as we speak. So in about 5 minutes, we'll begin, okay? Thank you for your patience. Hey, Gabe from CASO, I just unmuted you and I wanted to let you know, so for some reason I cannot make you a panelist. Can you hear me, Gabe?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Hi,
Okay,
Gabe.
great.
Yeah, so for some reason it worked in the training session, but I cannot make you a panelist. But I believe I can still make you presenters. Since you're the first one to present, we will test it. And then
And
worst case,
I think you guys have my slide deck, right? So how about you just run the slides? I'm on a mobile device anyway, so if you guys just run the
okay,
slides,
that's fine. Yeah,
I can just speak and that'll be fine.
sounds good. Might take
Okay.
me just a minute, but I have your slide.
Okay. I'll go. Can you see my video? Am I on video?
No, I think attendees cannot put videos. So
And I suppose it doesn't matter much anyway because we'll be looking at my slides. So
yeah, we will see how you look like. But
okay.
if you have the chance to switch from a mobile to a laptop, that will solve everything. If not, that's okay. We'll deal with it.
Yeah, the work laptop I have has so many security features on it. It
Mm,
doesn't let me do very much. So the audio often doesn't work. So this is typically better.
no problem.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start, guys. So good day again, everyone, and welcome to today's workshop on grid-scale battery energy storage systems, looking at best practices on the international utility space. My name is Ari Kellenson. I'm a T&D program manager in Seattle, and I will be the event moderator as well as the session chair. A little bit about the logistics of this platform. You guys can all see there's a graphical user interface on your right-hand side of the screen, and it has a couple of options. Should you want to speak, you will identify there's a logo to raise your hand, and that will tell me that you have anything to say, a comment or a question. So please use that function should you want to speak. And then when we have time, either the last 5 minutes of each presentation or during the general Q&A session, I will moderate the discussion and make sure we will answer as many questions as we can. Over and above, should you not have access to audio or you just prefer to type your questions in advance, you could use the question tabs. I recommend using it for the detailed technical questions because it's easier for me to track and also extract following the event should we want to disseminate the questions to the relevant speakers. In addition to that, there is a chat box that you could send private messages to your colleagues or to all attendees. If you have general comments you think it's relevant for everyone or a technical issue, please use that box for that. In addition to it, there is a tab called Handouts section. If you expand it, you'll be able to identify the agenda for today's event, which I'll go over very soon, as well as the guiding slide deck where you could see a little bit more details on the presenters and their bios. Looking at the agenda for this session, so session A1, we will have 4 presentations, 20 minutes long each, starting with experience from California, from Gabriel from CAISO, following with Bijou Gowi from the AESO. Then we will have a presentation from Ameresco by Jim, and last presentation will be Stephen Goldman from Fluence US. If you want to see the agenda for the entire 2 days event, as I mentioned, we have 3 sessions. Session A, European experience. Session B, Australian and South Korean experience. And session C, European experience. All sessions will be recorded along with the PDF version of the slide deck will be available on my CIADI portal. A few weeks after the event, all members from all groups of CIADI will have access, especially considering the time differences. A little bit, sorry, about CIADI for those who don't know us. So CIADI is in the business of facilitating information exchange and working on collaborative research. We essentially offer electric utilities the right tools to solve their most challenging needs by applying a user-driven platform, sharing the cost, as well as sharing perspectives from different regions and different utility roles and responsibilities to make informed decisions and address technical as well as other utility challenges and top priorities. We have 21 programs within CIADI, and we're covering vertical power from generation on the left-hand side all the way to transmission, distribution, behind the meter, cross-functional, looking at those programs that have several sectors within them. For example, energy and integration strategy. These programs are essentially looking at distribution and distribution, sometimes also a little bit behind the meter. They're taking, a more broader approach to the energy mix and its integration. So highlighted on the screen, you could see the 3 programs that are most relevant for grid-scale battery energy storage within CIADI. From the left, energy and integration strategy. As I mentioned, this program is all about grid edge technologies and strategic integration to take informed decision at a high level. They look at integration consideration to make informed decision in a cost-effective manner, reliable and safe operations. Next, it's the distribution equipment and planning. Used to be called DLAM for CIADI members who are not sure. This program is all about distribution planning, line asset management, maintenance, and making sure there's hosting capacity. So definitely storage is an integral part with that. And last but not least is transmission planning and operations. And essentially, this is the program that is most relevant for this event. As you guys probably know, this event stems from an ongoing project to survey international utilities, manufacturer, TSOs, and ISOs with their latest experience on grid scale BESS. And these folks are looking at transmission planning and operation, load flow studies, modeling, and so on and so forth. And BESS is becoming more and more relevant as utilities are trying to reach net zero carbon and also accommodate various energy mix in terms of planning and operations. So a little bit about the project. On the line, by the way, with myself, Dalia Wilson, she's a coordinator supporting me with this event, as well as John Sabiston, the technical advisor who has more than 30 years of experience, used to be planning manager at Hydro One. John, if you would like to say a few words about this project, where it came from and where we're currently at, I'll really appreciate that.
Hi, John Sabison here. I'm really pleased to have this event today. Battery energy storage is one of the enablers of the future zero carbon grid. Without the battery energy storage, without batteries to store excess energy, some or a lot of the energy which is produced by renewable sources or could be lost. And so what the batteries will do would be to store this energy that at whatever hour of the day it's produced and release it for when it's most needed. So really, batteries will be enabler for the future grid, and we'll all have to become very familiar with them. The operating constraints of a battery system, the planning constraints of a battery system. Obviously, a battery doesn't spin at 3,600 RPM, so there's the issues of inertia and all that sort of stuff. And we'll all have to become very familiar with how battery systems work, the various technical limitations thereof, and over this session, we'll learn about some of those things and how utilities that have battery systems have coped with it. So thanks, and I'm really looking forward to this session.
Thank you, John Sabison. That's a little bit about this project. And next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Paulo Barbosa, who is the head of research and the contractor for this project. As I said, this is within the transmission planning and operation, and introduced himself, ICP Tech, and his team that is supporting us with this event. Hello, Paulo.
Hello, Ari. Good afternoon for all. It's a pleasure to be here, joining everyone in this webinar. And thank you for all speakers that collaborated with us, and of course the audience. This is a fascinating project we are involved in. We already discovered many issues relevant related to the battery and its function, its role in the grid, not only as a tool coupled to renewable, but also as a key component for grid stabilization. And we already discovered during the project many new technologies, many business model, need of regulation around the world, and of course, many opportunities, because as many authors has already highlighted, battery storage is already a fourth class of assets in the electrical industry. And therefore, it's a good opportunity to share knowledge and to learn more with you about these issues. ICP Tech is a small consulting company. We have many clients in all the segments of generation, transmission, and distribution companies. And we joined a team for this project that includes myself, and Carlos Davi, that is engineering, a doctor, also and a consulting in the energy area, and Julian Hunt, Dr. Phil in engineering science. And we are very enthusiastic commitment with this project. Thank you for all your contribution.
Thank you so much, Paulo. So without further ado, let's dive into the first presentation by Gabe from CAISO. He's a storage sector manager. So Gabe is, as I said, storage sector manager at the California Independent System Operator. He has 10 years of electricity industry experience He oversees storage policies related to developing and improving the storage model, as well as hybrid and co-located resource policies. He also serves as a liaison for storage-related issues for parties outside of the ISO. So Gabe, let's try if I can share my screen and make sure that you can speak to that. Just one moment, please.
Hey, good morning, Ari. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction. I know we only have, maybe around 20 minutes or so to get through this information. I think I'd like to just start by saying thank you for inviting me to speak today. This is a really important, and I'd also like to apologize for my video not being on. We seem to be having some trouble with the software, which I think these things always never go without quite one hitch or another. But at any rate, the storage discussion is really heating up. I think in the last 5 years, there's been a lot of conversations around what we're going to do when storage is on the grid, how we're going to start to handle it, how we're going to start thinking about storage, how we're going to start modeling it. But finally, those conversations are starting to change. We're starting to have conversations around, we can go ahead to the first slide, please. We're starting to have conversations around what we're doing now that storage is starting to integrate onto the grid. We're starting to see some of the challenges of storage actually being there and available, and a significant portion of our generation. And it's really exciting to see. So it's definitely a hot time to be working in storage. There's a lot of challenges that we're already seeing and facing and overcoming. But I do think in the next few years, we're going to have even more participation from storage resources and even more challenges to address. So California right now is the area of the country that has the most storage currently installed. We currently have, and frankly, it may be the most storage in the world. I'm having trouble getting a hold of that data. If anybody has that, feel free to reach out. I'd love to see some of it. But we have about 2,600 megawatts of installed capability on our system today. So that's essentially 2,600 megawatts of charging capability paired with 2,600 megawatts of discharging capability at any one point in time from the entire battery fleet. Most of this storage capacity is 4-hour duration. So, if you have a 100 megawatt battery, that would mean it has 400 megawatt hours of energy charging capability. So in our case, we've got 2,600 megawatts. So that's roughly 10,000, a little bit more than 10,000 megawatt hours that we're capable of storing during one part of the day and then discharging later in the day. Nearly all of this capacity that we have built on the system today is lithium ion capacity. So, and I'm in these numbers, I'm not including pumped hydro storage. I'm not including any other storage technologies. But we are talking about mostly lithium ion, which has come on.
Hey, Gabe, I'm not sure if we lost you or it's just me.
I don't hear him anymore either, Ari.
Okay.
COVID-19, so we're a little bit behind where we thought we would be about a year ago. But looking at projections 2 years or even 3 years into the future, a lot of our battery developers are saying that they're going to be able to overcome these COVID-19 related supply chain issues in the relative near term, and we should be back on track to meet long-term goals for storage installation. So things are really happening quickly. And if we go into the next slide, I've got a little bit of data here. I know we don't like, I don't want to get bogged down in data with so little time to talk about this. But this is the amount of energy that's stored across the entire aggregate storage fleet for any particular hour on a month-to-month basis in the summer of 2021 or the second half of 2021. So in June 2021, that's the box in the upper left. You can see that during the evening hours and the early morning hours, state of charge across the entire fleet of batteries was relatively low, and see that storage resources were charging.
Gabe, we sometimes are losing you. Cannot hear you right now.
And we still have relatively high loads. What's very interesting about these graphs are when you move from June to July and then to August across that top three panels there, you notice that the upper bound of how much average charging capacity you have across the system greatly increases from one month to the next to the next. And for example, in say June 2021, on average, a typical state of charge in the middle part of the day might have been 2,500 megawatt hours. By the time you get to August 2021, those states of charge have almost doubled. So we're looking at 5,000 megawatt hours during the middle part of the day there. And that's not driven by changes in something going on in the marketplace. That's driven by additional capacity being built and installed into the California system in that very short period of time between June and August. So we're already seeing really massive increases in the amount of capacity, and this, this probably represents a point in time in August where we had roughly, I don't know, maybe 1,500 megawatts of capacity installed on our system. Like I said last slide, we had about 2,600 megawatts of capacity today. By the time we get into this summer, which is the most constrained times on the California grid, we're going to have close to 3,500 megawatts of storage capacity. So you can just imagine that these numbers are going to be even greater when we think about average charge across the day for 2022. And like I said, when we had just a few resources on the system, we did see those resources providing ancillary services, primarily regulation for the California markets. As we got more and more lithium ion storage capacity on our system, we saw that those regulation markets did become saturated, and more of the storage resources that we had on our system were providing energy arbitrage, where they were charging up in that middle part of the day and then discharging in the evening when we had our highest peak net loads and we had our highest prices of the day. And that's the typical pattern that we see for storage resources and that we're anticipating for the additional capacity that we have coming online. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please.
Thank you, Gabe. Maybe a quick question from one of our attendees. He's saying, so increased build in the summer increases storage capacity. However, what's the cause for increased SOC in the summer?
Yeah, I think we're getting to the point where storage resources aren't free to operate. They don't actually generate any electricity. So if you just had a fleet of storage resources, you would never be able to serve load. In the case of California, when we see energy being charged into these resources, so when these state of charge graphs are increasing, so roughly hours ending 9, 10, 11 o'clock, we see some pretty large increases in aggregate state of charge. That energy has to come from somewhere, and it's purchased from the grid at wholesale prices to be stored and then sold later back onto the grid. And purchasing that energy also incorporates round trip efficiencies. So if a storage resource charges, say, 10 megawatt hours of energy at one point in the day, it may only have, say, 8.5 megawatt hours of energy to resell to the market at a later point in time. So all of this is captured in our markets, but the key that's happening here is that when the storage resources are charging, they're typically either charging from renewable resources. So in the spring months, the California system typically does have excess solar generation that we effectively wouldn't be able to use if there's nothing else on the grid to serve. So that excess energy can be stored by batteries, which is typically absorbed at negative prices. And then during the summer months, like these months that I'm showing here on the top of the graph, you know, the energy that's being charged by storage resources is often the most efficient gas generation that we have on our system. So it's very low priced gas. And then later in the day, that energy is being used to displace high priced gas or peaking gas resources that are typically used during those highest priced hours of the day. So there really is some economic efficiency that we're enjoying here from having these resources participating in our system. And on net, we're in a better place than we would be if we didn't have these resources. We'd be either generating excess energy that we couldn't sell, or we'd potentially be using very expensive peaking resources where the marginal cost to operate batteries is much less.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Gabe, what are the gray dots here?
So the gray dots are outliers. So I think, you know, this is a standard box and whiskers plot. So I believe the box incorporates the typical, you know, 75% or percentile range of typical operations. The whiskers include, I believe, up, you know, from the bottom 5% up to the top 95th percentile, and then the dots would be outlier data. So like in July, we can see some of the dots up above the box and whisker plots, indicating that on some days, we really did have a heck of a lot of state of charge, much more than typical. And I think that would be representative of days when we may have been charging as much as we possibly could across the storage fleet on the very hottest days in July, when we were really depending on all the capacity we could potentially get across all the storage fleet and all the generation fleet.
Thank you, Gabe. We can move
Yeah.
on.
Great. No, that was a really good question, very insightful. So I do appreciate that. So why are we seeing all this new storage capacity coming onto our system? I don't think this is a mystery to anybody, but we should be very clear about why this is happening. As in the state of California, we have a mandate to be greenhouse gas neutral in terms of electricity generation by 2045. The state of California, including the California Public Utilities Commission, is working on their integrated resource plan, or IRP, which essentially outlines the mix of resources we're going to need to shift to from where we're at today, from a system that's primarily operated on gas resources to one that's going to be primarily operated on renewable resources, so wind and solar resources, maybe some imports of wind and solar from neighboring states outside of California, and then potentially some other projects like biogas, pumped hydro, offshore wind, those kinds of things. But the way that process starts is by building out additional solar capacity in the very near term and building out additional storage capacity in the very near term. And like I said, most of the storage, you know, as an ISO, we're agnostic about the technologies that are coming on the system, but from a cost perspective, what we're seeing is lithium ion is typically the lowest cost method of getting storage onto the system and getting it on quickly. So that's primarily what we're seeing built, and that build out is being driven by state procurement mandates, which are coming from the Public Utilities Commission. When we talk about 2045, we're really thinking about serving most of our load with wind and solar. And if you're thinking about serving load from solar, you've obviously got this problem of the sun only being up for 12 to 16 hours a day, and needing something else to bridge the gap in between when the sun is up and shining and when the sun is not shining. And that something else is wind to some extent, but wind is also variable and may not be blowing all the time. But the other thing that's solid is the storage resources. And that's part of the reason why we are seeing such a big build out right now, is in an effort to move towards that resource mix that we want to have by 2045 so that we're greenhouse gas neutral. So more in that vein, this build out plan does call for 13,000 megawatts of new solar by the summer of 2024. So those are some really big numbers. You know, we were just talking about 2,600 megawatts of installed capability on the grid today. That number is really going to balloon in the next few years, and we're going to be up to, you know, maybe, I think the projections are 13,000 megawatts of capacity by 2024. Those are very large numbers. That doesn't come without some internal costs to the ISO either. We obviously have to increase our vigilance in monitoring storage resources, making sure they're charged when they need to be charged. And those are very different you know, tools that are necessary to actually monitor those resources than our operations team at the California grid are used to managing. So that's going to be a real challenge as well. Some of this build out is also required by additional electrification. So like many states and these clean energy goals, they not only have requirements for how electricity is generated, but they also have requirements about how end-use customers actually use energy, and there are requirements in the state of California about switching a lot of things from natural gas, which is used pretty heavily across the state, to electrical, like cooking ranges, hot water heaters, gas dryers, those kinds of things. There are state mandates in place to not be selling those kinds of appliances in significantly into the future. And as we see customers start to switch over to electric, that means higher loads on the grid and higher demand from the resources that we have installed, and a greater need to install additional resources in the coming years. Okay, well, thank you so much. So this is my final slide, and I'll go through it quickly because I know we are tight on time right now. But storage does, you know, it's very exciting to be working on storage, and it does provide a lot of great benefits to the system. You know, there's no startup time for lithium-ion batteries. They're always available. They have a very large ramping capability, so they can frequently ramp from their PMIN to their PMAX, or from their PMAX to their PMIN in a single 5-minute interval, which is the granularity that the California ISO is operating the system on. So there's a lot of big benefits to using these resources, but that also means that there's also some challenges about how the ISO models these resources and ultimately how they're going to get compensated in our market. So California currently, and this is a project that I'm working on and leading, is developing a new methodology to model storage resources. The traditional market models involve resources bidding in megawatt price pairs into the market. We are working to redefine this for storage resources so they can bid state of charge price pairs into the market, or megawatt hour price pairs into the market. And then we have a sense of how much it costs incrementally for storage resources to charge or discharge at any given state of charge. So for example, if a resource has a nearly full state of charge, maybe they're willing to release some of that energy as long as prices are moderate. So maybe $50 or $60 per megawatt hour, they'd be willing to provide some energy to the grid. But if that same resource is depleted down to maybe say 10% or 5% of total state of charge, that resource may be very reticent to sell energy unless prices are extremely high. So maybe $100 or $200 per megawatt hour, or maybe even something higher than that and closer to our price cap. Price spreads are more important for storage resources than necessarily a particular price that they're buying energy at or a particular price that they're selling energy at. So the way that storage resources make revenue is from a combination of buying energy and selling energy, holding, you know, resource adequacy revenues or ancillary service revenues aside. So thinking about the way our current our market is currently constructed, where we are only really concerned with the current price at any given time, which is set by a marginal operating resource on the system, may not be the smartest way to price resources or to think about big cost recovery or uplift payments for storage resources into the future, because they may be more dependent on what the price spreads actually are and less at what any one particular price is at any given time, which is really something interesting to think about. And I think there's a lot of research going on by academics and other ISOs and RTOs across the country right now, thinking about what electricity markets might look like in 10 years. And it could be something, frankly, very different than what we have as a model today. So outcomes for storage resources are very different in the day-ahead market compared to the real-time market. So in the state of California, we run a day-ahead market that operates prior to the start of an operating day. So we'll run it at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's for a 24-hour period that lasts from midnight to midnight on the next operating day. That market model has the ability to see the times of the day when the grid is the most stressed and needs the most energy. It also has the ability to see the times of the day when the energy has the most, or the system has the most excess energy, and it can optimally schedule storage resources to charge during those low price times with excess energy and discharge during times where the system has the greatest need. Our real-time market really doesn't do that. It looks about an hour ahead of time. So for example, at 11 o'clock in the morning, so 11 a.m., it might see the intervals from 11 a.m. to noon, but it doesn't know that later in the day, say at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m., there could be some very high loads across the system, and prices aren't going to get any more favorable than they already are. So we should be charging up all of our storage resources. Instead, like I was just talking about, those real-time markets are more focused on prices at any specific 5-minute interval, and they don't necessarily have that long look ahead that might be necessary to make those kinds of strategic decisions with a storage fleet. So in the future, we may need to think about real-time markets that have a longer horizon in order to optimally schedule storage resources, particularly shorter duration, like 4 or less hour duration batteries, because our typical markets, the way that they're working today, don't actually do that. The other thing that we're thinking about, and I think this is where a lot of storage conversations go, is what's going to happen when we start seeing more long duration storage in the system. So we typically think about long duration storage today as being 8-hour duration or 10-hour duration, but there's even another class of long duration storage, which might be 100-hour duration or more. And that's the kind of storage that could potentially be used to carry energy across seasons. So when energy is very abundant in the spring, maybe you charge up this seasonal battery, if you will, and then you plan to discharge that battery during the summer when you have your highest loads here in California. But eventually, as we switch over to this grid mix with more and more renewable resources, solar is relatively abundant in the summertime. It's going to be more challenging to operate the grids in the winter. So we're also going to need to be thinking about long duration storage to meet needs in the winter. So I think I've gone over my time a little bit, and we may have started a little bit late, but I'll pause here for maybe one question or so, and then I'll turn it over back to Ari.
Thank you so much, Gabe. And as much as I, hate cutting off the discussion, it's very interesting, but we do have an ambitious agenda in front of us. So what we'll do is we'll wait with the Q&A session for the general. I do have a couple of questions written here. Dalia, my colleague, will probably copy paste or send it to you privately if she can, so that you can prepare, and we'll answer it during the Q&A session, which, by the way, will take place from around 2 to 2:40 this afternoon.
Right.
But for the sake of time, thanks, Gabe. We will move on to the next presenter of today. Second presenter is Biju Gobi. So Biju Gobi is currently working as a manager in the operation, engineering, and market support at the Alberta Electric System Operator. His accountabilities include engineering studies, coordination with system and operation planning, engineering services for the control room. interconnection reliability standards, and ISO rules. Bijou is also part of the transmission planning and operation members and act in the executive committee to support and steer the program in the right direction along with other executive committee members. So Bijou, thank you so much for agreeing to support us with this event, and I will make you a presenter to hear from you on developing energy storage solution as the key to renewables.
Well, thank you, Ari. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to present to this group here today morning. I will share my screen. Ari, can you see my screen?
If you could just put it in full screen mode.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. So, okay. So thank you again for this opportunity. Biju Gopi, I'm the manager for operations engineering and market support here at the Alberta Electric System Operator. So primarily wanted to kind of give all of the audience here today kind of a high-level view about who we are, what we do, kind of some of the principal drivers behind our energy storage roadmap that we have developed a couple of years back, and kind of how it relates to the outlook of the fuel mix that we all know. Gabe talked about it in the California presentation prior to here. So just kind of giving you an outlook about what that looks like from an Alberta perspective. Then some of the initiatives that that I will go through in terms of tariff treatment for storage, which is a hot topic currently, as well as some of the other technical initiatives that are underway. And again, in terms of what the next steps are, at least for this year, from an ISO perspective here in Alberta. So in terms of the ISO, we are just like any other ISO in North America. We connect customers, we plan the transmission, operate the grid, plan and open the market, plan and operate the market. The one thing to note here is that we do not have a day-ahead market. It's an energy-only market. And we have an energy market and we have an ancillary services market. The ancillary services market is for procurement of operating reserves, which is a day-ahead market here in Alberta. In terms of the system, we have about 26,000 kilometers of transmission lines. Our peak load is around 1,200 megawatts. We still have some coal in our fleet. They're all in the process of getting converted so that we can meet provincial and federal emissions targets. And this kind of gives you an overview. The one thing to note here is that unlike the other ISOs, we have a high load factor. I think it's about 84–85% in the province. So there's not a lot of variation between our off-peak load versus on-peak load. This is something that is separate, distinct from some of the other ISOs down south of the border from us. And we have 3 interties. We have interties to BC. It's an AC intertie, an AC intertie to Montana, and a DC back-to-back intertie with Saskatchewan. Currently, we are at the tail end of WEC. So that makes us a weakly interconnected system. So a lot of the issues that we see as more renewables connect, as more DERs come online, the effect or the operational challenges of integrating those are kind of amplified because of our weak interconnection with the rest of WEC. In terms of energy storage specifically, we kind of, the drivers, obviously, as you all know what the drivers are for energy storage, what's the value proposition that energy storage brings into utility and ISO operations. So that those were kind of some of the drivers that triggered a lot of the activity in Alberta. It started with publishing our energy storage roadmap. And what that roadmap does is basically look at a few pillars for energy storage, like how can we incorporate them in the planning process from an operations perspective, from a markets perspective, and kind of developed a short-term view and a longer-term view from a roadmap perspective. The short-term view obviously is making sure that energy storage is able to play in the Alberta electricity markets in the current construct, the current framework, and the current ISO rules. So we did produce a lot of information documents providing clarification to the marketplace on how they can participate in the existing market structure, while we work on a longer-term view of incorporating storage, into markets. Understanding the full, utilizing the full potential of charging and discharging. In terms of projects that we currently have, we have 4 energy projects currently that are connected to the grid. It's a total about 60 megawatts. As you can see, there are 2 standalone batteries. There's a wind plus battery, and obviously there's a hybrid gas turbine facility, an LN6000 that's paired with a battery as well. So these are the existing projects that we have. But where it gets really interesting is the future that we see for battery and energy storage in the province. And this kind of gives you a good overview about what that looks like. We have 24 projects in our interconnection queue, which is public, and it's a total of 3,500 megawatts, above that from a storage perspective. And as you can see, we've got compressed air energy storage, pumped hydro energy storage project, but obviously, the bulk of the energy storage is in the battery storage space. As you can see, there's a lot of interest, obviously, in the province, for standalone batteries, as well as solar plus battery, or pairing of storage with renewable resources in the province. And there are a few projects coming up this year, with 8 of these in service date in 2022. Which will add around another 200 megawatt of energy storage to the grid. And keeping in mind, we are a 12,000 megawatt peaking system in Canada. In terms of the work plan, like I mentioned, we are in the process of finalizing the long-term view. We are going through finalizing the rules that would be amended as part of the roadmap. There are about 60 odd rules in both the technical space and in the market space that would be made public for stakeholder engagement later this year, and then finally, it will be filed with the Alberta Utilities Commission towards the end of this year. And we're working closely with the industry through different forums and conversations and engagements to finalize the set of rules and standards that would be implemented in Alberta as we integrate storage in the long term. In terms of outlook, I thought it is important because the aspect of storage, how much it integrates, goes hand in hand with outlooks in different jurisdictions. For us, like I mentioned earlier, we do still have a bit of coal remaining in our systems, and they're all expected to convert to gas or retire by 2025. And the ones that do go on to be converted to thermal or gas, they would stay on till about 2039, and then obviously, most of the fleet will get replaced by gas and renewables. Wind and solar, especially, are predominantly going to be on the rise as we move forward in the fuel mix space in the coming years. And again, this is another view about what that outlook would look like for us from an Alberta perspective. This is from the long-term outlook that we published last year, and specifically the clean tech scenario. It's one of the scenarios that we are looking to study. And we're looking at 39 to 40% of total capacity by 2030 would be from renewables, of which there is a fast storage component to it. And obviously, even the total energy that's produced by renewables is going to go up by 20 to 25% by 2030 and to 30% by 2041. So this gives you a high-level view about what the fuel mix outlook is for the province and how storage would play a critical role in balancing a lot of the intermittency that we see with renewable resources, as well as obviously provide its own value proposition based on the technology that it brings, and the advantages of the technology like fast response times, and quite a few other value propositions that storage can provide to the province. In terms of challenges, like I said, we are at the weak end of WEC. So obviously there are some concerns that we have while we need to connect to these renewables, and this is where I do see storage playing a critical role. Obviously, we talk about system strength, we talk about inertia as renewables connect. Is there a plan for synthetic inertia? That's something that we're looking into. Fast frequency response is critical for Alberta specifically because of our weak interconnection. We have a targeted product currently it's called load shed service for imports. But obviously it's a fast frequency response product where we expect response within 200 milliseconds. And obviously right now loads provide that service, but we're also looking at storage to be able to provide that service to arrest frequency declines when we go through a system event. And we have had a few of those in the past couple of years, and that poses operational challenges. And that's where I see storage playing an important role, given one of its attributes is fast response times. And obviously net demand variability. As we know, storage provides firming service, so that is something that we're looking to see if storage assets can, and battery storage specifically, can provide benefit in that space from a net demand variability perspective. And obviously, as a solution to wind ramp events, we are noticing more of that ramp events as we are connecting more wind and solar to the grid. And so that's where we think storage will help in the long run, as our curve kind of starts resembling closely the duck curve that all of you are familiar with California and the front end of it. So we're kind of expecting that in the long run in the province's future, and that's where we think that storage can provide some benefit during some of the ramp hours. And obviously, we will continue to monitor system requirements and address reliability. Like all the other ISOs, we are looking at storage as an alternative to transmission build in the province, and we make those criteria clear through our long-term transmission plan that we released earlier this year, the 2022 long-term transmission plan, which gives an overview about how storage can participate and in the Alberta markets. In terms of some of the interrelated initiatives here in Alberta, currently, we are looking at what tariff would apply to especially the charging portion of battery storage. Is it wholesale price? Is it something else? Definitely, we need to understand and respect the attributes that battery storage brings, and obviously the tariff treatment has to be commensurate with that. So that is currently underway under the DOS modernization tariff, and it is public information, but that's something that we are looking into in terms of a tariff treatment from a storage perspective. The other piece is the fast frequency response. We are wrapping up a pilot project, or at least starting a pilot project in operation soon. And the whole idea of it is to ensure that energy storage can participate in fast frequency response. We need FFR, as we call it in the province, especially in Alberta, to manage and support frequency, especially when our intertie trips. And as you know, our intertie with BC is there's a cross trip with metals, so we lose the entire WEC interconnection at times, and we are islanded from WEC. And to ensure that the impact of that particular contingency, especially when there are high flows on the interties, is mitigated, we do need a fast frequency response product that tells us that requires us to arm a certain amount of fast frequency response from technology that can provide us with that service, and it's a response time of 200 milliseconds that we currently have. And so we believe that storage, and battery storage specifically, can play a crucial role as the fuel mix or in this space evolves, because batteries do provide a really good fast response times and to the order of milliseconds. So that's another space where we see increased requirements for fast frequency response in the province, and that's something that we are working on as well. So in terms of next steps, like I mentioned, there are about 60 ISO rules that are amended, or some of them are new, that's in the pipeline. It includes a mix of mostly technical and markets, and the aim is to have those released to the public for stakeholder engagement towards Q2, sometime in that frame, and then obviously file it with the Alberta Utilities Commission towards the end of this year. And obviously, we will continue to work on our systems and tools. Obviously, in terms of our EMS, would be respond to from a visibility perspective to ensure that both charging and discharging aspects are visible to our EMS systems, dispatching them as well. as any other initiatives that we have in terms of them being able to offer into the market for both charging and discharging portions. Whereas currently there are limitations because of the traditional models that we have in the province, where you're either a generator or a load, but some system enhancements need to be in play to ensure that we are capturing the full value of batteries when they're charging or discharging. Then obviously we will continue to engage stakeholders and through our long-term planning process, where we are viewing storage as a transmission alternative, and and the needs will be identified through the long-term planning process as well. And so that's one of the areas that we are working in Alberta. I'm definitely excited about the potential that energy storage, especially grid battery storage, can bring to the transmission side. And obviously, there's a whole distribution side that we're also excited about, how batteries can play a role in that space as well. So that pretty much is kind of a high-level view about here. Yeah, that's pretty much what I had for my presentation today to the audience. I'm happy to take a few questions.
Thank you so much, Bijo. Very interesting presentations. We do have some questions that I assigned to you. If you can expand the questions tabs, you'll be able to read it as I follow along here. But I'll start with some of the quicker questions. A question from Suman. How is the capacity, benefit / value of the energy determined in the AESO for reserve margin, is calculated?
So we don't have a reserve margin calculation in Alberta. We do provide supply. We keep a track of supply adequacy from a short-term and a long-term perspective, but we don't have a reserve margin type of approach to calculating how much reserve margins we require, unlike the other ISOs, which do have a reserve margin of 15 to 18%, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you. Next question from Hydro Ottawa. Has the AESO looked at the megawatts of power BESS versus energy BESS needed to serve the ancillary and energy needs?
Sorry, could you repeat that question, Ari?
Sure. Has the AESO looked at the megawatts of power battery energy storage system versus energy battery energy, BESS for short, needed to serve the ancillary and energy needs?
So like I said, we are technology agnostic. So we will make sure that our rules do not impact or negatively impact storage from participating. We want to enable energy storage in the province, but we don't have a specific requirement for for how much energy do we need. We know what the requirements are for ancillary services, for example. We know how much of regulating reserves we need. And we need about 130, 140 megawatts in an hour every hour, and that storage can participate in those markets even today. So it's all based on how much we need, and then ensuring that storage can participate in a fair and equally competitive manner as compared to all other fuel resources in the province.
Thanks, Bijo. And last question for the sake of time. Does the AESO foresee a new interconnection to Site C in British Columbia to access new hydro generation?
At this point, nothing is in the works, and all our all the Alberta Intertie Restoration Program, everything is public. But at this point, nothing is in the works. And if there is something, it will be made public through our regular outlooks and transmission plans.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Bijo. We will move on to the next presenter here for the sake of time, and some of the pending questions will be either answered during the general Q&A session or followed up by emails. We'll see how time allows that. I'm gonna gain control back here. Show my screen. So, can you guys see my screen? Just making sure.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Dalia. So our next presentation is by Jim Fonger, who is VP Asset and Advanced Technology. So Jim is responsible for all DERs and other asset development and deployment in Canada. with over 30 years of business leadership in both telecommunication and energy sector. Jim brings a unique experience to this post at Ameresco, having led the development of many energy services and smart city projects in the municipal sector. So Jim, welcome and thank you so much for supporting us with this event. I will make you a presenter and you can take it.
Thank you, Ari.
Welcome.
That's great. Thank you for having me here today. And we'll just make sure we get the presentation up here.
Yeah.
So you can see my screen, can you?
Yeah, if you can just
go into the
full screen mode, yeah.
Okay, and we want to do display settings.
Yeah. Swap presenter view and slide view. There you go.
How's that?
That's perfect.
Okay, very good. So yes, thanks for having me here today, and really interesting to hear the presentations from both Gabe and Bijou. As system operators, there's lots of things going on in the world to try and accommodate battery energy storage systems, and both of them have some really good perspectives and plans on how to integrate what is really a new technology, but boy, is it taking off quickly. So what I'm hoping to do today in the presentation is to talk a little bit about how, and facilitating on some of the information that Gabe and Bijou talked about, how battery energy storage facilitates a net zero electricity system in the future. But before I do that, a little bit about Ameresco. We're a publicly traded company. You can find us on the internet at ameresco.com. We're traded on the New York Stock Exchange, and we have been public for the last 13 years. The company was founded in 2000, and the heritage of Ameresco was on the energy efficiency side of things. We're known for our ability in performance contracting, which is going into facilities, renewing what their energy systems are and doing it in a way that's a cash flow neutral result. And what that's led us into in recent years is also finding ways to install carbon-free energy systems on site as well of that. And it has also led us into utility scale projects, some of which I'll highlight for you today. But essentially, we are 8,000 customers strong. And in 2020, one of the things that we're particularly proud of is that the initiatives that we helped our customers initiate resulted in 12.6 metric tons of CO2 being reduced. And CO2 reduction is very much part of what Ameresco offers to its customers and helps them achieve in today's marketplace. So there's 4 projects that I wanted to highlight for all of you today that are projects that are either operating or will soon to be operating as part of the Ameresco fleet of projects. We have we have a number of energy storage projects across North America, Canada, and the UK. And what I'm going to talk to you about today really are, I would say, 4 of our leading edge projects that demonstrate the capabilities of these kinds of systems. So the first one I wanted to highlight is in Newmarket, Ontario, Canada. Newmarket is part of the Greater Toronto Area. It's just north of the city of Toronto, and it hosts the GTA's largest energy storage system on lands inside the Harry Walker distribution station that is owned by NT Power. It is an Ameresco-owned project, Ameresco Energy Storage, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of us. And this particular project is licensed by the OEB to participate in the independent electricity system market as a participant, and it provides energy services, operating services, and capacity to the system. The interesting thing about this project, and you can see its configurations and some of the benefits, but in the interest of time to be able to get through this, what I really wanted to focus on is the reason this particular system is online is in 2015, the Ontario ISO really wanted to work with battery energy storage systems and explore what their reliability would be on an ongoing basis. And in fact, while this is a 10-year real basic capacity contract that we have with the ISO, the main reason that it's in operation and monitored on a highly scrutinized basis by the ISO is to make sure that the degradation of the battery over the life of its use is not going to get it to a point where it can't perform the way it was anticipated to perform in its first day of operation. So the interesting thing about this contract is we're constantly monitored for how much energy we take out of the grid in terms of absorb. We're actually required on a workday basis, so not Saturdays and Sundays or holidays, but during workdays we're required. And at this stage, it's whenever it makes sense for us in terms of a market price standpoint, but we're required to absorb 4 hours of energy over the course of a 24-hour period, and at some stage required to inject 4 hours of energy back into the grid. So what they're ensuring that we're doing is we're actually cycling this thing on a regular basis. And over the 10-year period in our contract, what we actually have to be able to demonstrate is that the ability of this battery on day one in terms of its function to be able to absorb and put 4 megawatts onto the hour onto the grid for a 4 hour duration, is that we're actually able to do that as much at the end of our 10-year contract as we were at the beginning of the period. And the great thing about this system is it has been in service since early 2019, and it has provided very reliable service for us over those years with very little downtime for maintenance. And really the only issue we've had with the batteries is we've had a few inverters that have needed to be replaced. But aside from that, it has been a very reliable asset for us. We are actually providing energy and operating reserves in the market today. And in Ontario, for those of you who are familiar with the Ontario marketplace, energy prices are beginning to increase as a result of gas prices, number one, but also electrification is happening here faster than I think many people forecasted, including the ISO. So that's driving up energy prices, which is allowing us to see a little better return on our arbitrage areas, and we've also started to offer operating reserves as well. So in terms of the benefits of this particular project, as I mentioned, it's really there to demonstrate how batteries can provide reliable services for grid operators. It is connected, as I mentioned, to a distribution grid, the Newmarket Hydro distribution grid at a 44 kV level, but it participates in the Ontario market. So it's basically there in order to demonstrate the reliability of batteries. The other thing is that it is set up in a way that it can provide grid services, so it can form the grid. And should NT Hydro want to work with us to find some new ways to develop some grid-based reliability services, it's something that we're hoping we can do with the battery moving forward. And from a demand standpoint, York Region, Newmarket is part of York Region, north of the city. It's a high growth demand area, and one of the things that the battery is getting ready to do is to provide high demand periods within the area, high electricity demand periods as the region grows. And certainly, one of the things that we have here in Ontario is we're trying to, from our standpoint, the grid operator has a mandate from the Ontario Ministry of Energy right now to find a way, how soon can we get the grid to a net zero basis. The federal regulators would like all electricity grids across Canada to be net zero by 2035. I think some of them are still trying to figure out how that's going to happen. But certainly the ability to replace peaker plants with batteries is one of the things that this particular project is being able to demonstrate for the area. So some of our lessons learned here. What's interesting about this particular project is while it sits in a distribution station owned by Newmarket Tay Hydro, it is actually in an area where we had to avoid all of the infrastructure that comes into the distribution station. So we had a number of construction issues we had to learn as we went through the project. And from a siting standpoint, because it's a two-tier municipality, we had a number of issues we had to go through there to make sure that project was executed on time. There's your usual bird migration issues you have to deal with as you clear sites. There was a dewatering that was required, and also access to the site was interesting as we tried to avoid the distribution lines that were coming into that distribution station. So just because you actually have a distribution station to work with, it also has its issues in terms of deploying a system inside a live environment. The second project I wanted to talk to you about today is actually a behind the meter project. It is facilitated at John Paul II Secondary School, which is a school in London, Ontario. It's one of 9 secondary schools within the LDCB London District Catholic School Board, and it consists of a total of 54 educational facilities within southwestern Ontario. This particular school was built in 1991. It can facilitate about 900 students. And one of the things that Ameresco has done in this particular school for a number of years is execute on the energy efficiency side. And what we did through support with Natural Resources Canada is to build a microgrid on the school. The object of the school's project was to make it carbon free. It has solar resources that over the course of a year generate more carbon free energy than the school needs. And we've installed a microgrid on site with a battery in order to be able to manage that solar generation. I think the interesting thing about this project for the group is one of the things that we wanted to be able to demonstrate as a distributed energy resource is that this could actually help the local area grid in terms of increased electrification that would be coming to the area. So the battery on site not only provides us with a situation of being able to provide reliable service into that school. We've actually got it configured as a UPS. So we actually monitor for electrical quality on the grid. We island if there are surges or sags in voltage, monitor the grid to the point where we can return successfully, and the school is able to operate that way. But not only does that provide us with opportunities to demonstrate how the school can go on and off the grid as required, it's also set up in such a way that it is an energy market participant. And the school actually has far more energy than it needs in the summertime. And of course, it doesn't produce enough energy that it needs during the winter solar months. So what the battery does in the summer, the battery allows us to utilize that solar energy in such a way that we can participate in the market at periods when energy prices are high. And in the summertime, what the battery does is it actually allows us to go to the grid in the overnight period when the carbon resources on the Ontario grid are low and electricity prices are low. And we can actually download enough energy into that battery in the overnight period and then use the battery to power the school during the day. And the whole concept here was to be able to demonstrate how a distributed energy resource could manage itself in such a way that it can create a better uniformity across a utilities grid by using the energy resources in the overnight period when energy resources are reasonably abundant, and to stay off the grid when the grid can serve other customers during the day. Again, a number of project benefits that come out of this. One of the reasons why Natural Resources helped us with this particular project is the kids in the school at this particular time needed to be able to see and understand how a complex integrated energy system could actually take their facility carbon free, so that they know that the objects of getting to net zero is actually doable with the technology that we've got today. And of course, one of the other benefits we wanted to be able to demonstrate was that the school, in terms of deploying energy systems like that, may have an opportunity to earn some extra income playing into the local energy markets. This project went live in May of last year, has been operating relatively problem-free for the period. We're just going through tests right now with the ISO to be able to demonstrate that we can provide the market services that it's scheduled to provide, which is ancillary services, much like what we're doing with our new market project. The other project I wanted to talk about, and Gabe, I'm not sure if he's still with us, but I'm sure he has heard of this and is interested in this particular project. I can talk a little bit about it and tell you about some of the benefits. We're still in the midst of actually building this project. It is scheduled to come online later in the year, but this is a project that Ameresco has contracted with Southern California Edison, and we're basically working to build 3 grid-scale battery energy storage systems in existing substation parcels throughout SCE's service territory in California. And the technology that we're looking at putting in play maximizes reliability of the grid by charging during periods of excess generation and discharging during periods of need under the EPC mechanism that we've got for the contract. There's 3 systems across 3 different areas in California that you can see on the slide. The total power component of all 3 systems is a little under 540 megawatts, and the energy component of those systems together are a little over 2 gigawatt hours. So if I compare that to what Gabe said the installed capacity is within California, this will add about, I think, 33% to what they've already got installed, and it is scheduled to come online later in the year. One of the main features of the project is to provide resiliency and reliability to address, I'm sure, many of the power outages that you've heard that happen in California as a result of drought, wildfire, and heat waves. This is also going to be another project that's really going to help California achieve some of their clean energy goals. So of course, from this project, Governor Newsom has advised California to speed up the energy transition to face the immediate energy crisis and long-term climate goals. Inspired by this, global energy storage deployments are expected to nearly triple year over year, reaching 12 gigawatts to 28 gigawatt hours, according to a report by Wood Mackenzie in the California market, and that was supported by information we heard from Gabe this morning. And certainly this is one of the initiatives that Southern California Edison is doing in an attempt to meet their 2045 net zero greenhouse gas emission commitment. And certainly last but not least, this is a project that is in construction, scheduled to go into commercial operation in the summer of this year. It's a combination, it's a project that has done with both Holy Cross Energy and Colorado Mountain College. Holy Cross Energy is a not-for-profit rural electric cooperative within Colorado that provides electricity to about 45,000 members and their communities. And what this project consists of is 5 megawatts of solar PV. It also consists of a 5 megawatt but 15 megawatt hour battery energy storage system. The project is grid tied and sends electricity directly to HCE's distribution system that is left over from charging the battery. But essentially what the PPA model is designed to do is a majority of the power from the solar system goes to the battery first. Excess goes to the grid, but generally it's the battery that's used to manage the power that needs to get out onto the Holy Cross energy system. But it is the property of the Colorado Mountain College that the battery actually sits on, and the solar resides. So it looks a lot like the JP2 project. The difference here is the college itself is not directly connected to this particular system, but they do use the attributes. So what this is going to do is this project itself will help the utility to increase the renewable energy it provides to its members. It has obviously a net zero target to reach by 2035, and it also allows the membership or the cooperative to keep energy prices low. And the interesting thing about this is that what the Colorado Mountain College does is they use the renewable energy credits. They retire them so that they can actually help get the college to its carbon neutrality goal, trying to get there by 2050. So just summing up here very quickly, of course, you can't do an energy storage presentation without the infamous Rocky Mountain College graph on the screen here that talks about all the different use cases that energy storage can be used for. But I think one of the things that is really it's really in support of is helping utilities and their customers get to that path to net zero. And if you look at some of the reports, and NRCan has done some reports here in Canada that talks about how is the grid going to get to net zero by this 2050 period. And as you can see from what happens on the scenario towards 2050 is hydro, solar, wind, and energy storage are really the components that are required to be able to achieve the objectives that we're looking for. And then also, if you look in terms of the updated market trends, energy storage continues to be something that is projected to become a much greater component of the system as we move forward. And in terms of actually putting it in play, doing it quickly is obviously something that's required if we're going to achieve these aggressive goals that are set for 2025, 2030, and 2035. And I think, as we heard both from Gabe and Bijou, electricity system operators are really gearing up to be able to be prepared in order to facilitate the transition. And certainly from a technology standpoint, I think Gabe mentioned earlier that there are some long-term energy storage systems that are beginning to emerge, and I think they're going to be, they will be required on a move-forward basis if we're going to get to a stage where it's a majority of renewables that are in play for the energy system. But at the moment, it's lithium-ion that is the dominant technology that's being deployed. It has many benefits. As discussed earlier, its fast ramping ability, also the ability to provide different services to the grid, to provide many different services, make it a really great solution right now in terms of helping to get more renewables onto the grid. So Barry, that's my presentation, and happy to take any questions now or later on, depending on what you'd like to do.
Thank you so much, Jim. I do have a question or comments, I should say, from Jay Mearns, who is with NCPA, or Northern California Power Agency for short. He's saying, thank you for sharing the civil and communication infrastructure issues with your installation. These can easily be overlooked. So we appreciate your presentation. Another quick question from Michael Anderson. What is the outlook for energy storage as a transmission deferral asset outside of market services?
You know, that's actually a really good question, and one of the things that Energy Storage Canada is working on now is what are the values that local distribution companies can actually benefit from by deploying energy storage as a non-wired solution. So really taking it outside of the value that you can get from a market, and when you're operating in an open market, say as Alberta or Ontario is here in Canada, but are there other beneficial ways to use it so that you don't have to increase your substations or feeders, and actually providing some value? And I think that's actually there. The issue is, in terms of from a regulation standpoint, there's lots of things that regulators have to look at in terms of how LDCs can deploy these technologies in order to make it work economically, either for a utility or a third-party company such as Ameresco who wants to work with a utility.
Thank you, Jim. Let's see if there's any questions for you. I think the other questions are either towards Bijou or Gabe. So I think that's it for now, but we will have time for the general Q&A session. Should anybody want to raise their hand and ask the question, they're more than welcome. So for the sake of time, I will move on to the next presenter. I'm going to set myself the presenter just for the moment here. Second. Okay, the last presenter for session A1. We will have Q&A session and then A2, but for A1 is Steven Goldman. He's a senior manager from the marketing department. So Steven leads marketing and communication efforts in the Americas region for Fluence US. He's leading grid-scale energy storage technology and services company, supplier of project in 25 countries and territories, including a range of US power markets, Canada, Brazil, and the Dominican Republic and Chile. In his role, Steven works to promote energy storage technologies, diverse application and benefits to generators, networks, and large energy users. So, Steven, thank you so much for joining us today, and we're looking forward for your presentation. I'm just going to make you a presenter, and feel free as I talk here to introduce yourself as well in 1 minute or so.
No worries, and good afternoon, everyone. Good to speak with everybody today. I'm embarrassed. I actually realized that I need to update my bio. We're actually in 30 countries now, not 25.
I'm sure people will forgive you for that. It's all good.
One moment.
Okay. You should get a message to share your screen now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can
All right.
see it. You can just put it in full screen mode, please, Steven.
It should have been already. One moment. Should be in presenter mode. Strange. I'm putting it in full screen mode, but for some reason it's not showing it that way. Well,
Ari, you're muted. I see you trying to speak.
Oh, I said, no, that's fine. If you can't figure it out, try to see if you can select the screen when you share. If not, that's okay. It's large enough. So for the sake of time, go ahead,
yes,
Steven.
Of course. Of course. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steven Goldman. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager for Fluence, covering the Americas region. I've been with the company for a little over 5 years now. I started with one of our parent companies, the AES Corporation, back when we were what was talked about very early on as a skunk works, as a startup within a much larger company that was investigating the use of grid scale storage to provide ancillary services, and has grown and grown to the point where first we spun off as a joint venture of AES and Siemens, and now we're a publicly traded company on NASDAQ. Just showing the slide only just to give a quick sense of the scale that Fluence has been delivering at recently. We have at this point over 3,600 megawatts of projects globally in 30 countries. And what we've gone, I think, beyond what many providers are seen as is just simply an integrator of technology. We actually offer energy storage products and services in terms of maintaining assets over their whole lifetime, but also are offering digital offerings as well, digital applications that aid with the optimization of assets, both from a dispatch perspective and from an overall life cycle perspective. What I'd like to talk to you about today, the topic that was offered to me was how it was energy storage's value in the procurement process. And I wanted to walk through some trends that I thought might be interesting to this set of audiences. The first thing I would share is just energy storage has moved from our earliest days of being very bespoke projects that were either being built within buildings or being built within what we've come to understand as like, ISO standard container style enclosures, to becoming much more modular. In particular, what we've developed is called the Fluence Cube. But the idea has been that as energy storage has grown in terms of market appetite, the speed for which it needs to be deployed on site, the agility for it to be able to be deployed on site, has led to now us in particular, and then other providers working with smaller enclosures that make it easier to scale a system, to adapt it, and to fit it onto difficult sites. So what you're seeing here is actually a rendering of a system that's going in Australia, that's going to be on the site of a former coal plant that was originally sited, had about 2 gigawatts of coal capacity on that land, and now still has the grid connection available. And so we're working with hello?
Hey, Steven, sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to make sure you're sharing the right slide. Currently, we're seeing slide 1.
Interesting. Okay. They're not advancing.
Maybe they're advancing on one screen, but not the one we see here.
Let me stop my screen share and then restart it. Maybe that's what's going on.
Sure, no issue.
Are you seeing them now?
Yes, I see the mouse. And so if you click on the arrows, let's just see that you can switch slides or select the slide with the mouse. Yeah.
Oh, that's frustrating. It's not showing it.
Or we can, I can open it very quickly. Okay. Let me just.
I think you may need to run them. I'm not sure why it's not advancing for me.
No worries. Let me just open your presentation and I'll share my screen and you can speak on that.
No worries.
Just a second here. Here we are, Steven.
Okay, thank you, Aria. Apologies for that.
Hey, no problem. So just a second here.
These are lifelong lessons. As technology evolves, it never always works exactly how you would like it to.
And you nailed it with the training, I think, so that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Where am I trying to find? I'll make myself presenter. Okay, won't be long, guys. Sorry about that.
Sorry about that, everyone.
Presenter, show my screen. Which screen is it showing now?
So I was on slide 3, was showing about the modularity of energy storage.
Okay, so let me know if you can see it. And that's a PDF, so let's be creative and see if I can do this, and then 3.
There we go. Excellent, thank you.
No problem. Go ahead, Steven.
No worries. So this is an aerial view of what will be the Hazelwood site in Victoria, Australia. It's was formerly, as I was saying, was formerly a site of a 2 gigawatt coal plant, and we're doing an initial deployment there of 150 megawatts and 150 megawatt hours. That's going to be the start of replacing capacity at that site, utilizing its existing grid connection and adding flexibility onto the grid in the state of Victoria in Australia, where they're seeing a rapid an acceleration of coal plant retirements, and are now moving to replace that with a mixture of renewables and storage. So the modularity is one aspect, but the greatest strength of energy storage, as on the next slide, is 3 main values. One is, as I mentioned, the speed of deployment, that you can build energy storage assets far faster than you can a range of other assets that have greater permitting requirements, often a great deal more in terms of public engagement. Energy storage can fit onto a lot of spaces with a smaller footprint. And overall, that reduces risk for the owner and the power system, because the services can be provided much sooner than many other assets. The second value is on the scalability, is that in many cases, say if you're building a gas peaker, there is a range of sizes that you would build, but with battery-based resources, you can scale all the way down to half a megawatt or even smaller if needed be, all the way up to we're currently, the largest system we've deployed to date was 300 megawatts, 4 hours, and we have larger systems in the offing. And the benefit of that is it avoids overspending and underutilization of a system. It allows a grid operator or a developer to assess the need over time and upgrade if there's a benefit to doing so. And it really makes sizing to the market need more effective. And then the third principle is the adaptability of a deployed asset, that because there is a mixture of hardware and software controls underlying a battery-based asset, that there's the ability to upgrade it over time, to add software updates, to add new capabilities, and it allows a lot more flexibility in terms of how the asset would be used, and therefore to be able to access future revenue streams. If you can move to the next slide. So our team has been working on deploying energy storage at the grid scale going back to 2007. We put the first project, the first lithium-ion grid scale project into operation in PJM came online in 2008. After our team was looking at the potential benefits of electric vehicles being used as a grid resource, and thought to ourselves, well, why do we need the cars? We just need the batteries, and started investigating the potential. And the earliest projects were focused on enhancing generation. So it was a mixture of releasing capacity that was being held back at generation to provide ancillary services. We were able to provide that with the battery storage and allow those plants to operate at a more optimal set point. Now, as we saw, as markets moved to embrace that functionality, batteries were filling a need, but they also quickly saturated those markets. And so then the power markets turned in to see what other functionality the batteries could provide. The next stage that we saw was during a natural gas leak in Southern California. There was the need for capacity to be brought in to fill in local reliability gaps. And that led to the first emergency procurement of 4-hour storage in Southern California, to which Fluence's team was one of the parties that was deploying. We brought 2 projects that were 30 and 7.5 megawatts online in the span of about 8 months. And we and others contributed 100 megawatts of storage onto the California grid in a very short amount of time. So speaking to the speed of deployment. What we're seeing today is that shift away from what we consider the gateway drug of storage applications, which is the ancillary service markets, to today's bread and butter, which is in the U.S. Southwest in particular. We're seeing a lot of appetite for standalone storage peakers that are serving similar purposes to natural gas peakers for local reliability and capacity. Those California projects were very much the vanguard of that, and now we're seeing just so much growth in that particular application in CAISO and across states in the US Southwest. The second is we're seeing a lot of growth around solar plus storage mega projects, where we're seeing the opportunities of pairing solar with storage, whether in AC coupled capacities where they don't need to be co-located. So in some cases, they can share some benefits from sharing the same land and grid connection, but don't need to be. Or doing DC coupled systems where you can then take advantage of co-locating those assets to oversize the PV to inverter ratio and be able to store more, gather and store more power from a larger solar installation to on-site storage. And then the third area that we're seeing really growing very quickly, especially in the last 2 years, has been of software being deployed to automate the bidding process to optimize asset performance in wholesale power markets. That has grown immensely. We've seen first in Australia, we're now optimizing roughly 20% of all grid scale solar and wind assets, and have now been working to optimize battery assets as well. And then on the horizon, what we're seeing as looking ahead on energy storage procurement is the emergent use case of energy storage for what we're calling virtual transmission, where storage is functioning as a transmission asset. I believe Vijay was speaking to that to some degree. And then the further proliferation of digital applications that are serving a wider range of purposes. All right, if you move to the next slide. This is just a quick example of where we started, which was capacity release at a coal plant in Chile. This was the first commercial project that our team deployed, and it was the grid rules were requiring that the coal plant operate at a lower set point so that it could hold back a certain portion of capacity of spinning reserves. It lowered the overall output of the system and therefore lowered plant revenues. And by deploying battery storage at the site, it enabled them to release that withheld capacity to increase output by 4%, which was the equivalent of 130 gigawatt hours per year. Next slide. I'm going to move through these fairly quickly because I know we're kind of short on time, and I want to make sure that we have ample time for the Q&A. This was the first of the projects that we were deploying for capacity peak power in California, one of a pair that were essentially deployed to just clip the peak, essentially. We try to flatten the load profile in Southern California. And so they do roughly daily duty cycles of providing peaking power, but also are available to provide ancillary services to the grid as well, and to do so with a ramp rate in the hundreds of millisecond range. If you just go to the next slide, you can see the scale that this is starting to take. So that initial project was 30 megawatts 4 hour. We recently finished deployment. It was early last year. I'm sorry, can you go back one slide? For AES in Southern California to deliver the Alamitos Power Center facility, which is a 100 megawatt 4 hour system. And it's incredible to see the growth that these systems are taking, where they're moving from, a handful of containers in a parking lot somewhere built to seismic standards to now we're delivering what in essence can take the footprint of a Costco or a big box retail store or a data center that sits unobtrusively and has no direct emissions to the community around it. In addition, I wanted to show the example that's up on the screen now, which is another project that has just recently been completed in Chile. That is, as I described, a DC coupled system that's pairing solar and storage that is being recognized for 5 hours of capacity value as a result. It's helping reduce exposure to market risks, and it is Latin America's largest solar and storage project at this time. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, Ari, 2 more, if you don't mind. And what you can see here is the role that software is currently playing in helping optimize the bidding process for wholesale market players. What we had seen emerging was that as batteries are being brought into the market, they could respond much faster, but the bid preparation process represented a bottleneck in the industry. So we first had worked with and then acquired advanced microgrid solutions, and the software tools that they had been developing to help with that would enable batteries to bid across both day-ahead and real-time markets, and to optimize not just the optimal bidding scenario from a revenue perspective, but also to keep the performance of the battery in line with warranty and contractual constraints. That strategy requires trading across multiple markets and products, and to ensure that you're not operating outside of the operating behavior that is built into the system. This is the original system contracting in any long-term service agreements. That requires over 100,000 decisions every hour. And so our software that we've started making available, not just for our own systems, but also to owners of renewable assets and battery assets that we did not supply, is enabling a far more rapid preparation of optimized bids to be submitted into the wholesale power markets. Next slide, please. The other trend that we're seeing is a much broader range of hybridized projects that are moving forward. We have one, I believe, that I can't show right now that is being co-optimized with geothermal. We've hybridized almost every power asset I can think of, from coal to natural gas. We have multiple projects, I believe, in the Dominican Republic that are co-sited with natural gas projects. Solar and wind, obviously. We did the first wind and storage hybrid in the US in Western Virginia. And then more recently, we created what's been referred to as a virtual dam or a virtual reservoir, where energy storage is being used to hybridize non-traditional, well, not non-traditional, but hydro with dispatchability constraints, such as run-of-river in this case, or agricultural dams is a project we're working on in Australia, where battery storage is being used to optimize the dispatch of hydropower that is either operating on a schedule where it's optimized for, say, agricultural use, not power generation, or run-of-river hydro where it's less ability to regulate it. And so therefore you want to time shift the power output from it. But what's also interesting is, as in Chile, we saw greater capacity recognition for the solar plus storage project that I showed earlier. This is also enabling the project owners to receive capacity value from the storage. So it's a 5-hour system as well. And it's adding the ability to provide ancillary services from a run-of-river hydropower scheme. So as I mentioned, looking ahead, the next frontier that we're seeing is storage as a transmission asset. And that's where batteries are being deployed not to enhance generation, but to enhance transmission and distribution grids, where it's basically using battery systems in order to help mimic line flows on lines that are facing constraints or that are reaching capacity. What you can see here is just a quick illustration of how this is being done in theory. We've worked to propose projects, I think, in the US, in Chile, in Australia, but the fastest growth we're seeing on this, as you'll hear tomorrow from Brian Perus, who's our VP of Sales in EMEA, is we're seeing the fastest growth in Europe, where Lithuania is starting to take a leading role in this. They went from a 1 megawatt project now to a 200 megawatt project. And then in Germany, they've proposed a 1.3, a range of transmission utilities have proposed 1.3 gigawatts of projects that are going to fill this need. The idea being that if you're looking at the potential of doing line upgrades, putting battery systems into the mix is allowing to serve as either generation or load, depending on the need, but basically obviating or deferring or avoiding entirely the need to build new lines and allow existing lines to operate closer to the thermal limits, as well as providing additional ancillary services, providing real or reactive power. Ari, if you can advance the next slide. And some of the benefits are on the screen here. The potential of storage as a transmission asset is one, as I mentioned before, speed is a massive factor. Between construction, permitting, obtaining of easements. Battery storage can be deployed almost as much as 80% faster than traditional transmission lines. Also with a far smaller footprint, which makes it easier to site projects. You could fit 200 to 300 megawatts of storage on the equivalent area of 600 meters of 220 kV transmission line. And it's configurable to a range of sizes, applications, and the additional grid services that it could provide are being very actively explored right now in different jurisdictions. What I was hearing from Bijou is that there's interest around FFR and potentially inertia. Australia is where I recently relocated back from, is very actively exploring this on the grid forming capabilities, on storage's potential to serve as a voltage reference, on the ability to provide not just frequency control, but fast frequency control to within 2-second or faster ranges, similar to what's currently being deployed in Ireland and in Great Britain as well. In addition, the speed of deployment means that projects can happen faster, meaning the benefits can be reaped sooner. And it can also help reduce the inefficient dispatch of generation due to congestion. Overall effects of battery storage as virtual transmission is that by deploying batteries along congested corridors, you can help mimic line flows and allow the system to operate more optimally, where lines are able to hold back less of their capacity, for similar to the way that the coal plant example I mentioned before, that lines will be able to operate closer to the thermal limits because they don't have to hold back quite so much capacity for contingency purposes. Lastly, the flexibility of ownership compared to single-use assets means that the potential owners could access additional services from virtual transmission assets as well. So they're frequently either a less costly option or a more profitable one, in that they allow the owner to access a wider range of services. So I understand I moved through quite a lot, but energy storage has been advancing very quickly across the span of Fluence's 13 plus years of experience. We've worked in almost every application you can think of thus far, with the exception of residential, and it's really becoming the foundation for greater adoption of renewables, of building stronger, more resilient grids, and overall transforming the way we power our world. So looking forward to questions, looking forward to discussing with everyone.
Thank you, Stephen. So just to make sure, there's a couple of slides here that I think you touched on, but there might be some delay. But let's dive into the Q&A session. We are a little early, actually, thanks to you, Stephen. So I appreciate you accommodating the time and some of the technical delays that we have seen. So for the Q&A session, I think really some of the question could be addressed to all panelists. So I'm just going to set myself a presenter here very quickly, and then we can all discuss. And by all means, if anyone has the answer, and you can also support us answering it. So true, I'm already sharing my screen. Just going to switch Windows. So yeah, we are currently here. So I'm going to read some of the questions that we have typed, and then I think some of them were addressed to Gabe, but he's not currently with us. So anybody else could answer that. Just trying to find the question tab.
Hey, Ari, I can start. So
Sure.
we have one from David Kirsch. This is directed to you, Stephen. He's asking, how is the operation of the energy storage system determined in terms of grid operations, peaking, backup, FRR, etc.? If a battery is being installed by an independent power producer in a balancing authority area, is it the BA's role to direct the use of the asset or the energy storage operator? MVAR usage also comes to mind.
My understanding is that it really depends on what the contractual arrangement is that we're seeing in some cases IPPs who are having specific dispatch conditions given to them under a PPA, or in some cases dispatch is being handled by the end customer who is the off taker. So the short answer is it really depends on what the contractual arrangement is.
David, I've unmuted you in case you have anything you wanted to follow up with there. Okay, I guess not. So thank you, Stephen. Next, we have a question from Devin Hardman. He asks, still to you, Stephen, can you elaborate on the virtual transmission capabilities of a battery?
Sure, of course. So there's a range of use cases that are being examined for it, where it's in some cases providing n-1 contingency value that ordinarily you would have lines or portions of lines being held back, where the battery is able to function in answering those contingencies and allowing the lines to operate at higher value. In other cases where you have lines that are running closer to the thermal limits, where you're running into generation being curtailed because there's just not enough throughput on the lines, where storage can store power and inject, time shift the power in order to meet the local needs, or to work on both sides of a constrained area in order to mimic the line flows, but where the line is already operating closer enough to its capacity, where you're trying to manage around it to avoid any potential contingency events. But what we're also seeing is that there's a desire for the provision of reactive power on lines. What I mentioned in Australia is they are running a series of interstate transmission lines, interconnectors, where they're frequently being pushed very hard in one direction, and where energy storage is being looked at as a bit of a backup mechanism to be able to inject power on one side or the other of the interstate corridors, just to ensure that load requirements are being met.
Thanks, Stephen. Devin, I've unmuted you in case you have anything you wanted to follow up with there.
No, that makes sense. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Dalia, as well. I'm now able to open the questions tabs, and there's a question from Bart that I think will be relevant to all panelists. So he's saying, I assume that the response is programmable. So for frequency deviations, they can be programmed to mimic governor response with droop, and the response rate close to a standard governor response for either hydro or thermal. Stephen, you have any idea? If you want, I can repeat the question as well.
No, to my understanding, they can be set to match governor responses, certainly.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Other questions came along during Biju's presentation time, as well as Gabe. So there is a question from Ryan from Hydro Ottawa. He's saying that it was mentioned that the weak or few interconnections to other jurisdictional transmission grids challenges integrated higher level of renewable generation. Has the AESO assessed the megawatts of renewable or intermittent capacity generation that can be added to the Alberta grid before there is integrity concerns? So Biju, in this case, that's for you. If you're still with us.
Sure. Yeah, hi, Eric. Thanks for the question. And that's a very relevant question we're dealing with in Alberta. We are doing a lot of studies in that space to figure out exactly what that number looks like at any point in time, how much can we integrate in real time, stay online. I know iGrid in Northern Ireland likes to use the word synchronous or system non-synchronous penetration. We're doing something similar, studies to see what is that percentage we can incorporate safely into the grid in real-time operations. Is it 40%? Is it 50%? So we're doing some sensitivity studies in that space. But obviously, there are challenges in integrating a high amount of renewables for a small, weak, interconnected system. Inertia being one of it. Obviously, they don't provide inertia. But then we are looking at technologies, like Steve mentioned, grid forming. We're looking if they can provide, through that, can they provide synthetic inertia? And for renewables as well, can they provide synthetic inertia as well? And if so, then what shape or form would that take place? Would it be through a reliability standard, like is currently in place, if I'm not mistaken, in Saskatchewan and Quebec, for example, or through a market-based mechanism? Yet to be determined, but we are concerned, with potentially declining inertia levels. And how, with increasing renewables, and how that can impact operations.
Thanks, Biju. Other questions, again from Hydro Ottawa. So the Ontario Canada IESO has a day ahead and real time down to 15 minutes and 5 minutes. What information can we present to them so they learn that 1 hour even may not be enough for better BESS participation, in terms of participation and benefits, question mark. So that's open again for operators in general, Canadian as well, but I think that input, what kind of input could be provided from the utilities to the ISO and TSOs to really see the bigger picture in advance can be relevant to all of you. So feel free.
Maybe I can start off. And again, I don't want to comment specifically on market design for Ontario, even though I worked there for many years and was part of the entire day-ahead commitment process, and obviously subsequent evolution. What I can speak to is from an Alberta perspective, when we look at reserves currently, and we still employ the traditional mode of procurement, which is, we call it a block procurement. So we pretty much procure reserves, be it regulating reserves, be it spinning reserves, or supplemental reserves in blocks. And that block is pretty much around on-peak block or an off-peak block. We do understand the concerns or the challenges that limited energy storage might face when we're talking about 16-hour off-peak block and an 8-hour on-peak block. And so one of the areas that we're exploring is, can we move from a block procurement mechanism to more granular form of procurement, like an hourly, for example. And currently, given our market constructs and intertie scheduling and everything else, we're going to stop at that granular level for the time being, as looking at least an hourly piece from a market design perspective instead of a block procurement. Underlying the fact that there needs to be a benefit to the province in moving in that space. So that's something under consideration in Alberta as we kind of renew or review market design for incorporating newer technology, limited energy resources into our grid.
Thanks, Bijou. Jim, you have anything else to add?
Yeah, just to add to what Bijou is talking about, in the Ontario marketplace, currently we're undergoing market renewal. So the issue that the gentleman from Ottawa Hydro has raised is there's actually a couple of components to that. First of all, on energy storage per se, in terms of being a market participant, is not really enabled fully under the current market constructs, nor is it at the current time being considered to be currently enabled to take advantage of all the things that it can do under the new market renewal concepts. Although, again, back through Energy Storage Canada, we're working with the ISO and the government on that particular initiative. Certainly the constructs here in Ontario are going to become more complex because we're actually moving to zonal pricing, where depending on various constraints across the Ontario marketplace will determine what kind of pricing is in there, and energy storage will actually play a large part in terms of how those zonal prices actually eventually materialize. But as it stands right now, I would say, and I can't remember if it was Gabe or Bijou talked about, I think it was Gabe who talked about the way the market operates is you really are looking at kind of what's happening currently as opposed to what's happening in the long term from a pricing signal standpoint. And I think he raised a good point from the standpoint that we're trying to stuff energy storage into the market in the same way that you would either do generation or demand response. And the fact is, given its ability to perform so many different services, there may need to be a completely different construct to have it, work properly. But these are all the things that I think ISOs across both the U.S. and Canada, depending on how they're structured, how are they best to organize this. But it's a good point. It's an issue, and for energy storage to have its full value, that there needs to be a better way of forecasting the appropriate point to deploy from a pricing perspective.
This is Stephen. I'd like to just say I absolutely agree with Jim. I think the market design question is very important. Again, having moved recently back to the US from Australia, we saw the national electricity market there wrestling with that concept exactly, where they had very advanced capabilities available from storage, but no easy way to price them necessarily, even as they had emergent needs for fast frequency response and for synthetic inertia. And so we're seeing, obviously the US will be a little slower in that regard, but there is a need for those clear market signals. We've seen the storage providing response speeds of as fast as 180, 150 millisecond response in terms of correcting droop and correcting frequency in Ireland around very high levels of renewables having been adopted, of high levels of wind output. So it's just a matter of how the market can properly value those traits. The single Irish market has actually, they've implemented a fast frequency response market, which our systems are feeding into, as well as others. But it's definitely been, I think, slower adoption we're seeing in other places.
Thank you, Jim from Ameresco, as well as Stephen from Fluence and Bijou from the ESO for answering the last question. There is a question from David Jacobson from Manitoba Hydro. David, you want to try to see if your microphone is working? Might be easier as well to make sure we're not alone here, just the panelists.
Okay, does this work?
Yeah, we can hear you. Hey, David.
That's great. Yeah, my question is related to using batteries to defer T&D infrastructure. So as we're marching down the path of electric vehicles, even fuel switching, et cetera, to get to net zero, we're expecting that our load will probably double in around the 2040, 2050 area. So by putting generation and storage closer to the load, we see potential benefits for deferral of infrastructure. So my question is, if you're going to do that, is the design going to change? Like, are you going to be mandated to go to redundant batteries as opposed to maybe single batteries that may be more appropriate for energy arbitrage?
Yeah, I'm sure Stephen will have some comment on that. The first thing is the way batteries are designed, and one of their benefits is they are modular, and there is the only single point of failure that's actually in a battery design is its actual connection point to the grid. All batteries, just in terms of their inherent modularity, come with inverters and battery systems that, quite frankly, if there's a single, if there's a point of failure in there, the rest of it picks up. So that the project that I talked about earlier in Newmarket, each of those 2 megawatt 4-hour systems actually consist of 4 completely separate modules that can operate independently at any point in time. So I think reliability is definitely a big component of the energy transition, especially as we move out to the edge. But the good thing about the architecture of batteries is there's a great deal of redundancy already built into the architecture.
Do you have a guesstimate, like what availability might be, like 98, 99%, or you think it's going to be even higher?
Well, I think what it gets down to is how modular is your battery given the total power component that you have at a particular location. So it depends how it's architected. But in terms of our, the system that we have in Newmarket, we have not had to take that system offline for maintenance. We've had to take chunks of it offline. So I think that's part of your, your +1 architecture when you're doing your design component is how do you want to build it? So if there needs to be, some kind of a maintenance, is what are you prepared to take out of service at any one point in time?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that assessment. That the way that we have been looking towards architecting systems to serve as long-term transmission assets is aiming for 99% availability and architecting to provide the right level of redundancy to the system that would be in keeping with that kind of performance. Our teams has a long history of working on transmission grids, so happy to connect you with the right members of the team if you want to get into deeper discussions about it.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, guys. Moving on to some additional questions. There is an interesting question by Nimal. Could you indicate the percentage energy loss from AC to DC and DC to AC conversion? Typically speaking, I know there's different applications, the technology is advancing, but what have you guys seen, approximately speaking, for some of the newer projects that you're dealing with?
Sure. So what I can talk about is on the short-term energy side, where you're dealing with we'll call it a solid-state battery system. Mm-hmm. Typically, what you have, and I think Fluence, Steve, you're in the same place on this, but batteries actually come with nameplate ratings of what their actual efficiency is from the battery backwards. Mm-hmm. And in other words, after the inverter, so you're talking about the DC component of the battery. And most solid state batteries are in the 92 to 95% efficiency range. Once you add the inverter in and you're looking at balance of plant, transformer losses, so we'll talk from point of grid connection, you're looking at somewhere in the 82 to 88% range, depending on the size of the system. But I can say, just using our project we are already looking at here in Newmarket, our round trip efficiency from an energy perspective on that project is 86%, so which is on par with what we thought. Certainly, the longer term duration battery storage, and I think we talked earlier about where is the inertia going to come on the system. Yes, there is synthetic inertia you can get from some of the power electronics that are within the existing inverter batteries. But some of the longer term solutions are actually using, we'll call it standard equipment that actually does create inertia on the system. But the downfall in the longer duration systems you're going to see is there will be a big degradation in terms of efficiency. In terms of electrical efficiency, you're somewhere between round trip between 60 and 70%. So it really does depend on the technology and the application.
Thanks, Jim. Following question by Nimal. He also would like to know the energy cost at the break-even point in terms of dollar per megawatt hours and the average end of life of an energy storage installation.
Steve, you want to take that one?
Sure. Typically, our systems are built for 20+ year lifespans. So there's certainly, depending on the contractual conditions, a system can be overbuilt if the idea is that the preference of the customer is to follow a degradation curve, or for it to be augmented over time. It just depends on what the commercial arrangement, the balance of CapEx versus OpEx is. But the overall system life are being built for 20+ year performance. As far as providing price points, it's not something I'd prefer to do in an open forum, but it's certainly something, feel free to connect with me afterwards. I'm happy to connect you with members of the sales team to talk through.
Thanks, Stephen. A question from Naveen from Enercan during the presentation of Gabe, but I think relevant for all. He's saying, to incentivize long duration storage, has there been consideration of seasonally based pricing? So pricing based on various season to optimize usage?
So area on the long duration energy storage, and certainly in terms of high penetration of renewables, if you're taking nuclear out of the equation for a carbon-free electricity system, long duration storage is really required. Unfortunately, I don't think it's there yet from the standpoint of really being able to understand, is there a system out there that actually can store the amount of energy that's required season to season? So I think it's early days, and I think there's a number of people who are spending a fair amount of research money actually trying to figure out the answer to that question.
Great. Question from...
I would just agree with Jim on that front. And then just to add to that, the one it poses is an interesting question because, we traditionally look at, I think the reserve margin thing came up when I was speaking, 15-18% reserve margin, long-term supply adequacy. But I think now there's a shift, incorporating renewables and storage to supply adequacy in the really short time frame. We talk about supply adequacy, the tech curve, we talk about supply adequacy from that perspective on a day-to-day basis. What does that look like when you have huge systems, ramping down, like solar, for example, like 18,000 megawatts over 3 hours, or in winter time frame, you're talking about 2 to 3 days, and there's no renewables. We have seen that in Alberta as well. There's a cloudy sky, there's no solar, hardly any wind, and if you're depending on storage, what does that look like? Given we know that we're talking about like 4 hours of storage, but beyond that, we would need some form of a mechanism to look at from a technology perspective. We do know that there's long-term duration storage resources that are out there, and how do we incent some of that into our various market design? But yeah, I totally agree with Jim. That's still in the early stages. We're just rethinking the whole issue of supply adequacy and how we need to move away from the traditional way of thinking in terms of reserve margins. But that's something in the works.
Thank you, guys. There's another question from Jay Mearns from the NCPA. He's asking if have life cycle NPV values been computed for lithium-ion based storage versus hydro pump storage?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. Have life cycle NPV values been computed for lithium-ion based storage versus hydro pump storage?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of looking at any individual technology, the net present value is going to have a lot to do with the number of cycles that are going to be attached to that particular asset, what its longevity is, how it degrades over time. So I'm sure, you know, on many of the developer side, Ameresco doesn't do pump storage, so it's not an area I have expertise in, but I certainly have expertise on developing net present value for projects. And in terms of, you know, looking at what you might use for a particular application, the cost of the technology, the longevity of the technology, where you can actually deploy the technology in terms of its need, where you're going to connect it to the grid. You know, the one thing that that solid-state lithium-ion batteries have is, as Steve has mentioned, they can be deployed very, very quickly, and there's very little environmental work you need to do to actually put them in play, especially on a grid-scale battery. Of course, when you're looking at a project like pump storage, that's a very long development period. There's lots more involved, and quite frankly, likely has a different use case attached to it. So obviously, present value calculations are big in any project you're going to deploy, but in many cases, it's going to be more than just your PV equation you use. It has a lot to do with, you know, how that particular storage application is going to serve the needs of the grid or its customers.
Yeah, definitely agreed. And what I would build on what Jim said, that one element that isn't usually brought into the discussion recently, at least when I've heard recent kind of battery versus pumped hydro discussions, is around water risk. That even if you're modeling for your pumped hydro to serve a certain purpose over 100-year lifespan, and you've estimated what your cost is going to be on a you know, a kilowatt hour perspective, that's not taking into account necessarily the risk that the water won't be there when you need it. And that's something that's being looked at, I think, in a range of jurisdictions. We had contributed, I think, to some analyses in India and in Australia of where, you know, we know the typical project lifespans for batteries, and there's a lot of discussion around pumped hydro having like a 100-year lifespan, but your ability to operate could very much cut into that. It just depends on where those projects are going up.
Thanks, Stephen. Ari, I see that we have a hand up here from Kieran.
Yeah.
Yes, just Kieran Claffey from Southern Company. Just a question for Jim. What chemistry solid-state battery are you using?
In terms of the, are you asking for a specific project or in general?
Well, I think you had said that you were testing solid-state batteries, so I just wanted to know, I suppose, in general.
Yeah, so I mean, lithium-ion phosphate is generally the technology that's used, you know, inside solid-state batteries. And Steve, I mean, you could probably talk to this better than I can. But so far, our experience has been on the lithium-ion side and the advancements in that technology. We are actually deploying a project in Prince Edward Island that is actually using a zinc-based battery. But it's a little different in terms of its application.
Thank you.
Okay, a couple of more questions. I'm very happy to see so many questions. Definitely shows that the session is very interesting. Is there a ratio of renewable generation to storage that is ideal or recommended as a rule of thumb? Again, by Hydro Ottawa. I guess it's for operators as well.
I don't know if there's a recommended one. I'm sorry, Jim, if you were about to jump in.
No, go ahead, Steve.
I mean, just I think the rule of thumb we have heard from developers that we've been working with is that typically, I think AC coupled systems that are either co-located or not co-located with solar are typically have an inverter, PV to inverter ratio around 1.3, 1.4, whereas DC coupled systems, I think the opportunity is there to get it significantly higher, around like 1.9 or even 2 is just the rule of thumb we are hearing. But I don't know, I wouldn't call that a recommendation. That's just more an average that we're hearing from developers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'd support like those. I think, Steve, those ratios are I would say, pretty good when you're looking at solar storage solutions, where you basically have storage which is in some way doing two things. Behind the meter, or sorry, behind the solar system can actually capture clipping. So it's a DC over voltage condition that the storage can pick up on the back end. But then it can also provide energy into the grid, and it can store energy from the grid. So it's I say the answer it's a very much it depends, and I agree with Steve. I don't think there's any one recommendation. You know, these energy storage is just like any other energy asset. How you use it, how you connect it to the grid, and what it interacts with, the actual use case, has a lot to do with its design. And at the end of the day, it would be the design that would determine something like that.
Thank you, Jim and Stephen. A question from Shane. Can the speaker comment on potential regulatory risks utilities may face regarding BESS or hybrid plants?
Sorry, Ari, question again?
If the speakers could comment on potential regulatory risks that utilities may face regarding battery energy storage systems or hybrid plants.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the regulatory risk is the same as the risk associated with standard energy plants. Mm-hmm. I mean, the risk is, you know, so there's two risks. A, there's a procurement risk, given that projects take a long period of time, and if you need something quickly, you want to make sure it actually is going to be delivered. So on the procurement risk side, I think what you want to make sure of is that you're dealing with companies like Fluence and Ameresco, who have good reputations. They can demonstrate that they've actually put these projects in the ground before, and that once they can come into service on time and perform reliably over the period of the contract. I mean, you certainly want that. In terms of once a project is in and operating, these projects have the same risk profile as a gas generator or you know, some other energy asset that you might put into play. There's always the opportunities for, you know, stuff to go bump in the night. That's why we carry operating reserves. But I would say there's no bigger risk. In fact, there's probably a less operational risk with these technologies than there may be with some of the legacy systems.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jim. Question from Angelo. What is the charging setup for typical battery systems? Do they have timers or settings to determine at which time of the day or load conditions they are charging if discharged due to use? So I guess it's talking about control systems or advanced controls, you know, to look at forecasted energy, times of usage, day versus night, summer, winter. Any comments that you'd like to highlight from, you know, recent developments?
So, I mean, generally, the systems themselves are either operated based on market conditions, and it's done manually, or it's done through an automated control system that actually looks at the markets. And I think Fluence and others, STEM, there are a number of providers out there that can actually operate the battery in terms of automated bids and offers and utilizing the system. So I would say it goes all the way from someone, you know, operating it remotely to having it automate autonomously inside the market. And as as was raised earlier, I think it was Steve that mentioned it. You know, there are operational constraints on the batteries. You want to make sure they're used in such a way that their lifetime is spread out as long as you can do that, and the way you operate the battery, and in some cases can affect that. So you need to take that into account as you're responding to various market conditions.
Thank you, Jim. And there are 3 questions from Ryan from Hydro Ottawa. So Ryan, I guess the best way for you is to unmute yourself, and then you could restructure the questions as you may see fit.
All right, thanks, Ari. One of the questions was about the battery storage systems. You mentioned some pretty good reliability, but where are the failure points and highest frequency? Is it the communication systems, the cooling systems, electronics, the cells themselves? What are they? Where are the pain points with battery storage systems?
Steve, you want to take that?
It's a very good question. I think the failure points most often seen would be if there were any material defects with the cells themselves. We haven't experienced many cases of that, but it's certainly these are complex systems with a range of components. So I would say that the key is having a well-engineered system that has strong monitoring in order to identify any issues. I mean, our systems are censored down to the module and cell level. They have early warning detection for issues arising, and then a range of safety measures throughout in order to arrest any single malfunction in order to prevent it from spreading to a broader section of the system. I'm not sure if that answers your question exactly.
Yeah, but if we monitor a lot, though, I guess communication then becomes the critical point that we need to make sure is robust.
Yes, certainly. I mean, that's something we work with customers around integration with what the right network setup is to ensure that monitoring can continue at the right pace, that tie into SCADA systems as allowed, are robust and provide the right level and the right frequency of communication.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, if you have another question, feel free. Otherwise, there is one more question, but go ahead.
No problem. The other question is actually to AESO. I believe what I heard was you had weak number of interties or weak interties with the other neighboring transmission systems, and that with added renewable generation in the system in Alberta, then you'd be concerned about instability or integrity issues. Have you assessed what that level of DER penetration would be to create an integrity issue in the grid?
Hi, yeah. So in terms of the sensitivity studies, we're doing a lot of that this year. So hopefully they should feed into some publications that would go out next year in terms of what that percentage numbers look like. We are going to release a flexibility report in Q2 of this year that kind of addresses some of the issues that we're talking about today from an inertia perspective, from other challenges. We also get into the voltage aspect, like short circuit levels. So we get into some of those details in the flexibility report that we're going to publish. And we also do have a lot of stakeholder presentations, especially the ones that I've made over the past couple of years, where I do talk about short, medium, and long-term mitigation measures to tackle the issues that we have, especially given that a lot of these issues are amplified because, like I mentioned, we're a weakly interconnected system. We have a strong tie line with BC, and another AC tie line with Montana. But if the BC tie line trips, we lose Montana as well. And so we're pretty much islanded from the rest of WEC. So we kind of see these issues much more amplified especially from a frequency perspective. And we kind of work through those challenges, from an event-based issue and frequency support around that to voltage levels around certain areas where we see a lot of growth in renewables, to also being able to manage net demand variability, which is also now beginning to creep up in terms of how much reserves or regulating reserves to be carried to manage NDV. Coupled with the new issue that we're seeing on the horizon is wind ramp events, ramp down events. We had one recently early last month, and it was a concern for us in terms of we saw a lot of wind, ramping down in a matter of hours, like 1,000 megawatt over a couple of hours, and that coupled with the fact that we have long thermal assets which have long lead times, so we we were struggling to get online assets, well in time. Of course, we did not get into issues like EA, but that's another concern that we are working through. But to answer your question, yeah, certain numbers, percentages, we are doing a lot of sensitivity studies, and that's planned for the end of the year kind of time frame.
Thanks,
Does that
Biju.
answer the question, Orion?
Yes, thank you very, very much. I'll be looking forward to the studies, yeah.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, two last questions, I guess. We have about 5 minutes or so. So a question from Jose Garcia. Which companies are the main manufacturers of the lithium ion or lithium phosphate batteries nowadays?
I mean, I can jump in and offer some. I mean, there's a range of tier 1 suppliers. I think CATL is widely acknowledged as one of the larger manufacturers of LFP batteries for stationary storage. Samsung, SDI, LG Chem. We've also announced fairly recently some partnerships with more emergent battery manufacturers, notably Northvolt, who are based out of Sweden. Who are working to produce what is going to be one of the most environmentally responsible batteries in the world. And then we also recently announced a partnership with QuantumScape around working to help commercialize their batteries as well, which will be solid state, which I know there's some questions around.
Thank you. Last question for this session, at least A1, from Berhanu from BPA. Are battery systems susceptible to issues associated with inverter-based resources like PV, tripping for low frequency or low voltages due to grid faults?
I would say that's a design issue in the system. It also has to do with IEEE standards in a particular area. Certainly the project that we have done in London is designed so that the operation of that system, although it doesn't support the grid, which actually doesn't help much based on what you're talking about, but it's certainly designed in such a way that it can trip off the grid if the grid leading voltage and frequency that doesn't help the application that sits behind the grid. So I really think that's a design component that you need to look at. It's also what the local utility will accept in terms of ride-through conditions. So I think there's a number of things that would go into figuring out how you could resolve some of those issues.
Thank you, Jim and everyone else. Quick questions from Riot. I think it's more a clarification question. Let's see if I remember it correctly. Looking again at the efficiency aspect, he's asking, what is the benefit for solid state batteries if the round trip efficiency is around 60 to 70%? I think I heard more in the range of 80 to 85 for the round trip.
Yeah, typically a round trip for solid state, and Steve, contribute here, but our experience has been, again, grid from a grid connection point. So you're dealing with all of the losses that happen throughout the transformers and the balance of plant, the inverters, right to the battery. On solid state batteries, you're looking at round trip efficiencies that are in the 85% range. And actually, Steve, I'd like to hear where you're at on that.
Well, I would like to differentiate between solid state and with lithium ion overall. I mean, solid state is something that we're working, as I mentioned, with QuantumScape to work on commercializing for our systems, but that's still relatively early days. So I wouldn't want to quote any efficiency numbers on that. I'm happy for folks to get in touch and for us to share information as we have it. But I don't really have any numbers I could throw out on that at this point.
I guess from my perspective, it was more on in terms of with lithium ion today, which is kind of, it's not solid state as you're talking about, Steve, for sure, but it's certainly what we're thinking about from a concept of a flow battery or a solid state battery. lithium-ion systems are in the 85% range.
That sounds roughly right. I mean, it varies based on system. It varies to some degree based on where the metering is. If you're measuring at what point in the system as well.
Sorry, then what was the 60 to 70% efficiency?
So if you're looking at many of the longer duration energy storage systems, for instance, a pumped hydro system is probably in the 60% efficiency range. You're going to be seeing some new longer energy storage systems out on the flow battery side. There's also compressed air energy. Hydro Store, for example, has a compressed air energy storage system. So some of the, we'll call them the potential seasonal energy storage systems, will have a lower efficiency attached to them than a lithium-ion system would. But what you're gaining is over that is you're gaining more cost effectiveness in terms of what it takes to actually store large amounts of energy versus what you get within a lithium-ion system. So it's a trade-off in terms of the efficiency versus the cost for that extra energy storage that you can get in that kind of a system. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes. Thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you, everyone. That will be it for the Q&A session. We covered a lot of questions, and if there are any questions that were not answered yet, we will follow up with the speakers to see if they could answer over email, and I'll be happy to disseminate responses. For the sake of time, I just wanted to thank all presenters of today and say that if you'd like to hear more and engage with future events, I know some of our events like industrial conferences will take place face-to-face in the United States. So if you're interested in other events in different topics, different departments, feel free to check the website. The slide deck is available in the handouts section of the GoToWebinar. And that's it for session A1. Very soon we'll start with A2. So maybe just 5 minutes bio break, just to, for those who still want to be part of it, let's just reconvene here in 5 to 10 minutes and we'll start with session A2. Thank you very much, guys, and thanks for all the help from the speaker and attendees to engage with such an insightful Q&A session.
Thank you, Ari. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Ari. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Great questions.
So while we're on the break, Yonghong Chen and Tonjixin Zheng, I hope I pronounced your name right. Let's do a quick sound check to make sure everything is working on your end.
Yes, this is Yonghong.
Can you hear me, Ari?
Yes, I can. How are you guys doing?
Good.
So we'll run a little bit over time, just 5 to 10 minutes. It was a long marathon. I want to give the attendees just a few minutes to take some short break, and then we'll begin if that's okay.
Sure.
I just want to make sure you guys can see my video. You see my webcam?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Welcome.
So nice to meet you, Ari.
You too. And thank you for supporting us with this very interesting event so far. And I'm sure it will get more and more diverse, right, as we look at other jurisdictions and countries.
Yes. All right, glad to be here.
Same here. Glad to host you.
All right. So I'll see you in a minute.
Yeah, 5 to 10 minutes. I'll let you know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Paulo. You're muted.
No, mute.
You are mute. Click on the microphone logo. If it's green, you're good to go.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There you are.
Just to say hello to Tong Chin and Young Hong. How are you?
Good. How about you? I haven't seen you for 2 years.
Yeah, actually, that was the last time I had been in US, because just before the COVID times, pandemic times, and it was, I suppose, 1 month before February 2020. Yeah.
I remember that just you visited us. After you visited us, actually we shut down. So we all went back home.
Yeah.
Think about it, maybe just a week after you visit us.
Yeah, that's it. And at that time, I could not visit PJM because they prohibit, considering the near COVID issues, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a pity, right? You come here to the United States, but you couldn't go to PJM to see.
Yeah.
All right.
Very interesting topics in the first session.
Yes.
There are a lot of good questions there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, in other words, in this area of
crowd.
Yeah, we learned a lot in this area, because everything is some kind in the beginning of this industry. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a fast growing. I see a lot of discussions on energy storage. You know, it's just a way, you know, it's maybe it's the right time for the energy storage to be part of the grid renewable integration.
Yeah.
Yeah. It will be an important part of it, but it's just a lot of unsolved issue.
Yeah, sure. And I suppose regulation, the regulatory framework, is behind the technology, you know, as always. It depends the region.
That's right.
Yeah, it depends the region. For instance, perhaps Australia is at a good stage of development.
That's right. Always you can see some new technology come in, and you're going to affect the market. Then you will see the regulation. You know, they will cross some boundaries, and there will be a lot of discussion. And finally, you know, the regulatory body have to make some rules to prevent, to remove any of the barriers for those new type of resources to enter the market.
Yeah.
I heard a lot of discussion about, you know, how do we trade those energy storage devices? It's a market value. At this way beginning, that the transmission asset, how do we get compensated? This is all going to be good questions there. Yeah. All right.
Hi, Adi.
Yes, I'm here. I think we can start.
Okay. Okay. We can. I suppose we can already start.
Sure. So I think, Paulo, I will skip all the introduction about CIARI, since most of the people already seen that, and we can start with the first presentation by Tong-Xin Zhang, Director of Advanced Technology and Solutions. You guys can see my screen, just making sure.
Yes,
excellent.
I can see your screen.
Excellent. So let me introduce Dr. Tong-Xin Zhang. He's currently the Director, Advanced Technology Solution at ISO New England Incorporated. He is responsible for research and development in wholesale electricity market design, analysis and operations, smart grid technology, and emerging technology in power system operations and control. He also oversees the development of various market clearing and simulation software, and has more than 20 years of experience in electricity market design and operations. So, Dr. Zhang, I'll pass control over to you now. and you should be able to share your screen in a moment.
Thank you, Ariel, for the introduction, and thank you for having me here. Let me know, how do I share my screen? Sorry about that.
You will figure out very soon. So you should get a prompt message asking you to share your screen right now.
Yes, okay.
Okay, great. So now we can see your entire desktop. What you want to do is open the PowerPoint. Yes.
You see my,
yeah, that's perfect.
Oh, it's perfect? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for the introduction. And I heard a lot of, good discussion. And it's just about, 5 to 10 minutes ago. It's very interesting discussions. And I think, we're working on the right topics. And, you heard about, the energy storage values, how do we bring the value to the system, and the roadmap of AESO in California is about the renewable, storage integration. So my talk here will be focused on the market participation of energy storage resources in the ISO New England market and associated challenges. For those of you who are not familiar with ISO New England, here is an overview of the ISO New England system, so that you know that ISO is not a not-for-profit organization regulated by FERC, which is for Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So we have 3 major responsibilities. The first one will be maintaining the day-to-day operation for the bulk power system. The second one is to plan the system to have enough generation capacity and transmission capacity to satisfy our long-term need for the region. And the last one will be the maintaining or administrating the competitive wholesale market. So we are part of Eastern Interconnection and located at the northeast of the United States. Can you see the whole screen or see anything that blocked that screen?
No, we can see the whole screen for the most part. There is a WebEx meeting reminder if you want to close it. I'm not sure why it's showing. Usually it doesn't.
Okay, let me see. I just want to make sure that I have something that blocks part of the screen, so I'll make sure that you guys can see the whole screen. Maybe.
Right now we see the slide that is saying ISO New England System Overview.
Slide ISO number overview, 2. Right?
Yeah, slide number 2.
Okay. All right. All right, just let me know if you have some issue to seeing the whole the screen.
Yeah.
So we're located at northeast of the United States and serve the sixth state of New England with 14.1 million population. So our historical load is about 28,000 megawatts in summertime, and around 23,000 megawatts in the wintertime. But compared to other ISOs, we're kind of small. We have about 350 generators and with 31,000 megawatts of installed capacity. Looking at the transmission lines, we have 8,600 miles of high voltage transmission lines. As part of the Eastern interconnection, we have 13 transmission interconnections to the system in New York and Eastern Canada, which is Hydro-Quebec and New Brunswick. We have a variety of markets, ranging from the capacity market, the energy market, and service market. We adopt location advisory pricing, and we have about 1,100 pricing nodes. Looking at the resource mix, we have seen a great transition of resource mix happening in the last 20 years. Basically, the system has been transferred from the oil coal dominated system into a natural gas dominated system. So if you look at the center of the figure, you can see that currently we have 43% of the installed capacity are natural gas, 22% is in the nuclear, and the renewables are relatively small. We have about 10% renewables and 6% of hydro. So you can see now the oil or coal or conventional units are really, oil coal units are really down to almost 0.2%. So if you look into the future, the grids can continue to evolve. With the region's decarbonization effort, we are seeing that renewables such as wind, the onshore and offshore wind, and the solar is coming to the grid. So they're going to bring new challenges to the system. So we believe there are to absorb those kind of to help the integration of renewables. Storage can be part of the solution. So let's look at the energy storage technology in the isolated system. So this is what we have right now. I have a 50 megawatts of grid-scaled battery storage project, which came online since late 2015. So relatively speaking, that's the small number of battery storage. But if you look into the future, we add our interconnection queue. We have more than 3,600 megawatt grid scale standalone energy storage projects. So energy storage, you can see that can bring some new challenge to the system. However, it's not new. New England has a successful story. History of operating the region's two largest pumped storage facilities, which can supply like 1,800 megawatt power within 10 minutes, up to 7 hours. So the one thing we see in the challenge, the other thing we're happy that we have some experience of managing a large scale, storage devices in our system. So storage now can participate in the market through different markets. So at least the different storage types and the market participation models on this figure. So I listed 3 types of energy storage, devices. One is pump storage devices and grid connected energy storage and distributed storage. On each row, we have several market participant model. One is called BSF, which is stand for Binary Storage Facility. You can see only the pump storage resource can participate in this model. And we also have the continuous storage model, which is called CSF, and demand response program, alternative technology regulation resources, and also the AG. I'm sorry. This last one, and the DERA model here. So if we look at the grid connected energy storage, they can participate through the binary storage resource model, continuous resource model, and the ATRR. For the distributed energy resources, in fact, they can participate through the continuous storage facility model, the DR and ATR, and the DERA model. So looking at the wholesale compensation for energy storage, So they can receive compensation through markets or through non-market construct. At the current stage, you can see that the pumped storage resource can participate into FDM, what we call the forward capacity market, which can provide capacity to the system and receive compensation based on the capacity contribution. They also can participate in the FRM, which is a forward reserve market, so offering 10-minute spending reserve, 30-minute open reserve product to the system. They also can participate in the day-ahead energy market and real-time markets. So for the day-ahead currently, or the day-ahead market, they can only receive compensation for the energy they provided. For the real-time market, they will be able to receive compensation for energy and ancillary service such as the TMSR with 10-minute spending reserve, 10-minute non-spending reserve, and 30-minute operating reserve. In addition to that, they will be able to participate in the regulation market, receive compensation for the regulation services they can provide it. For the non-market perspective, they can provide the wire support, and black start services. So they will get compensation based on the capability, but those compensation will be rate-based compensation. So it's not a market construct. Similarly, grid-connected energy storage resource will be exactly, can participate all the market we have listed above. So it's similar to, is almost identical to the pumped storage resources. There's a little bit different for the distributed energy resources. They can participate for the older market, but they may not be able to participate in to receive compensation from VAR support and a black start, because I believe they don't have they are not qualified to provide that kind of services. So this is really a very high level summary about what type of storage resource we have and how they're going to participate in the market and what kind of participation model they are qualified to participate through. So in the next couple of slides, I'm going to just give a little bit, details about each participation model. So first one, we can talk about the battery storage facility model. So you can see that the major participating resource will be the 1,800 megawatt of pumped storage resources. They can provide capacity, energy, and ancillary services. So they can be registered. Under the current construct, the battery storage resources facility have to be registered as both a generator and a dispatchable asset-related demand. So because we have kind of considered the two resources in our system, so participants have to put separate offers for the generator and for the dispatchable asset-related demand. So they're going to have an offer to buy, to buy energy for the demand part, and offer to sell to sell energy for the generation part. So because of the battery storage devices operating characteristics, so the ISO, either ISO can make the commitment decision, or they can self-commit themselves for both generation and the demand part. So with that, we can see that the ISO does not actually actively manage their state of charge, so that we consider that the self-management of state of charge. So the way of managing those state of charge is by submitting the maximum daily energy and maximum daily consumption limit in the day-ahead market. If we go to the real-time, in fact, our real-time unit commitment process actually respects the the physical characteristics of those battery storage facilities, such that we can guarantee the feasibility of state transitions from pumping to generating, or from generating to pumping. Battery storage resources are qualified to receive capacity market compensation based on their capacity values, determining our qualification process. The next one is called the continuous storage resources, facilities. So the major competing participating resource will be battery, basically the battery energy storage with a minimum size of 100 kilowatts. Similar to the battery storage resources, they can provide capacity, energy, and services. It will have to be registered as a generator or demand, a dispatchable asset-related demand, and a ATRR, which is alternative technology regulation resources. So similarly, they can offer to the energy and access markets through separate offers for their charge and discharge capability, and also for the regulation capability. Dispatchable, so those kind of continuous storage resources will be considered dispatched without any, we'll say that we'll have a continuous opening range. They can be switching from charging to discharging without any issues there. So at the current stage, continuous storage facility will have to be self-managed their state of charge, both in day and in real time. So different from the battery storage resources, the continuous storage resources will have to provide available energy and storage telemetries in the real time, such that we can recognize their state of charge limitation in the real-time dispatch. Similarly, CSF can receive compensation for the capacity market. I'll move on to the next participation model, which is called ATRR, which is alternative technology regulation resources. This program is initially designed for flywheel and is targeted at energy neutral devices. So currently, the battery portion and any continuous, for example, batteries can offer into the market to participate as ATRR asset, so they can receive compensation in our regulation market. For that portion, for ATRR portion of the battery, they do not have to offer energy. They do not have to submit energy offers. They only need to do it to provide the offers for the regulation services. So for ATRR resources, we consider that energy neutral if they don't consider any losses of their energy loss, because of round trip efficiency for energy for batteries. So they will receive an energy neutral signal every 4 seconds. So the energy neutral signal basically is just in telling people that if you don't consider any losses for round trip efficiency, the total amount of mileage, or say mileage, maybe regulation up or regulation down over a 5-minute period will be zero. It will be come to net zero. However, we do recognize that there are going to be some, there will be a round trip efficiency, though, for battery storage resources are not going to be net zero, energy consumption there. So we will see there are going to be some net energy consumption associated with the regulation services. However, those energy consumption will be charged as a location marginal price. I just want to So another type of participation model will be the demand response program and DER program. So for the sake of for the sake of time, I want to just mention that this is not for the grid level energy storage resources. It is more related to the distributed energy storage resources. So we do have demand response program. We set it up, established under the FERC Order 745. We actually have about 600 megawatts active participation. They can offer capacity, energy, and services. We do have two types of modeling for demand response resources. They can be at a DR, we call DR aggregation at the DR zone, at the zonal level, or it can be at a single location. But I just want to mention here, for storage resources, they can participate into the DR program and receive wholesale compensation at whatever the DR location they are registered. Similarly, we have the DER, which I'm not going to explain too much here. So because we're working on the FERC Order 7, we already filed to FERC on the FERC Order 7 2022. So storage can be part of a DR aggregation. So their compensation will be similar.
Hey, Dr. Zeng, quick comment. There is a reminder from the WebEx meeting reminder, just to make sure it doesn't interfere with the presentation. Okay. If you can close it, thank you so much.
Okay, hold on a second. How about now?
Looking good. Thank you again.
Okay. All right. So I just want to mention that the distributed energy storage resource can participate through the DER aggregation model. So with that, I want to move on to the last slide of my presentation. I'm trying to highlight some of the challenges in the energy storage modeling. I list them like 4 areas, so for people to consider, because those are the 4 also direct. Is our potential direction for the future development in the energy storage integration. So one area I think also Gabe also mentioned about this is alignment with cost structure in the bidding format. Okay, currently under the current storage model, and each energy storage owner have to offer the energy the buy bid, well, say the sell offer and the buy bid for charge and discharge. However, those kind of the cost structure may not be able to, to have a well-aligned, will not be well aligned with the cost structure associated with the energy storage, because we did not consider the degradation cost or cycling cost in those offers. I think it's all purely depending on the energy storage owners to put that cost. Whether the cost structure, existing cost structure, will be easy for them to enter those kind of degradation costs is a question mark. The other question is also related to the opportunity cost. We do have a process to estimate the opportunity cost for energy storage or pumped storage resources. However, there are some additional costs associated with that. For example, if you are considering the state of charge and you want to hold a certain level of state of charge for the next day, those type of opportunity costs are not easily captured in the current format. So, so those are the things I believe may be needed in the future. So we're looking at in this area right now. The other thing is related to the real-time dispatch and system reliability. I think currently we do not see a big issue for the real-time system reliability concerns because we only have like 50 megawatts of small energy storage resources. But we do monitor the state of charge for the large pump storage resources in our system. So in order to make sure, in order to position the generation, in the, for example, in the peak hours. So we do realize that in our real-time dispatch, we have pretty short dispatch window. Okay, so if you have a long duration energy storage, we only look at maybe 1, 2, or 3 hours ahead, and we may not be able to schedule the energy storage in the right, I would say, intervals or market intervals to satisfy our system reliability needs. So researching and to improve the real-time system reliability under the high penetration energy storage is ongoing. Similarly, we can also see the pricing and compensation and state of charge management. Our current pricing and compensation scheme may not create a dispatch falling incentives when the energy storage SOC is managed by the ISO. Currently, we do not have that issue is because of the energy storage is the state of charge is managed by the market participants. So if in the future, if we're gonna have to consider the system reliability and the market participants are really really willing to allow ISO to manage their SOC, then the pricing compensation scheme had to be revisited. The last point I want to bring up is the capacity valuation compensation. As you can see that the current methodology for capacity accreditation actually does not capture the reliability contribution of energy storage devices. Currently, for batteries, we enforce a 2-hour duration qualification process, which means that the qualified capacity for those energy storage resources will be the average output during a continuous 2 hours continuous operation. That type of rules may not rightfully capture the capacity contribution for the peak hour operation. So reforms are underway in this area. So with that, I conclude my presentation. I'm looking forward for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zhang. I do have one question from Ride at Hydro Ottawa. Ride, I'm not sure if you're here. You want to unmute yourself?
You mean?
Okay, great.
So my question was along the line of, do you qualify the specific technology to be used in each of the markets, or do you just issue your requirements and have anybody provide into that?
When you say qualify, you have to, yes, we have a set of rules about, if you want to participate in certain type of, like a generator or demand or any of the participation model, you're going to have to satisfy a certain type of requirement that will be specified in the market rule.
Right, but then you don't impose that the technology used will have to be a flywheel or compressed air or lithium-ion batteries or anything like that.
That's right. I mean, if you talk about, for example, the ATRR process, there's no specific requirement, but you have to, when I say requirement in technology, we're not going to say that there will be this only flywheel qualify for this. There's no such requirement.
Very good.
We are basically, the rule is technology neutral.
Perfect.
Thank you. And I guess as long as the technology meet the specific interconnection requirements, looking at, power factor, voltage, frequency response for that application, that's the requirements overall, not specific to one technology. So that's the only question so far I see, but anybody else on the panelists, maybe 5 minutes if you have quick comments or questions, that'll be great before we move on to the next presentation. Comment from the NCPA. It was an excellent overview, so thank you. Appreciate that. Let's move on to the next one, and if anybody has a question, we can follow up during the Q&A session. So we have one more presentation, another short Q&A session, a break, and then we will look at the Australian experience as well as South Korea. So let me gain control back here. Share my, oops, not my webcam, my screen. Show my screen. Okay, I hope you guys can see my screen. So the next presenter is Dr. Chen. She is a consulting advisor at the Market Research and Development. Dr. Chen is a consultant advisor for market R&D at Mid-Continent ISO or MISO. She has 20 years of experience in wholesale electricity market design and software development, and has played key roles in MISO energy and ancillary services markets, startups, and development. She led numerous market design enhancement projects, including the integration of stored energy resources, pricing reform, and reserve market enhancement under increasing uncertainty. So Dr. Chen, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll let you share your screen in just a bit and we'll be ready to go. Okay, you should get a prompt message on your end. Yeah, we can see it. You can just put it in full screen mode. Yeah, the button on the left there. A bit more left.
Sorry.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, good. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss the important topic of storage. So my presentation will cover the utility scale battery storage in the MISO region. First of all, just a quick introduction of MISO. So the Mid-Continent ISO covers about 15 states from Midwest to the South region in the US. And the Canadian province of Manitoba is also in our reliability footprint. As you can see from the map, we have a large footprint. And then we serve about 42 million customers with a generation capacity over 180 gigawatt. So when we first started the market in 2005, the region is mainly a coal-fired unit, so that probably account for the majority of the resource type. And then, but over the years, we had a significant retirement of coal, and now it's replaced by renewable and gas, and this trend will probably continue in the upcoming years. And first, I want to also give an overview of all this market development related to storage. So we actually started to introduce the stored energy resource back in 2010. That was right after we started the ancillary service market. So this type of resource was introduced mainly for the short duration storage, such as flywheel, to provide a regulation reserve. So back then, that's the main, type of storage, out there. So we actually was one of the first RTU to allow storage to provide ancillary service. Shortly after that, we, under the FERC Order 755, MISO implemented the regulation mileage payment. So it's a performance-based two-part regulation compensation. One is the capacity compensation, from the regulation clearing. Then the other is the regulation mileage payment based on their movement for providing the regulation deployment, following the deployment signal. Then later we also improved the AGC control, the automatic generation control deployment logic to basically deploying the fast ramping resource first, with a higher priority, because this resource can respond quickly and to correct the deviation. And then later on, with the improvement of the technology, so the new battery storage actually can stay much long, with a longer duration, like up to 4 hours or even longer, and then they can provide probably more services than regulation. Then we actually introduced the SER type 2. Back then we actually have a demand response resource type 2. That one was developed to allow this kind of demand response resource to provide all the services to the market. They can provide energy regulating reserve, spinning, or supplemental reserves. And then we also improve the system to allow the DRR to submit a negative minimum limit. So it can be dispatched between negative and positive dispatch range. So that actually fits really well for the storage. You have the charging and discharging, right, go from negative to positive smoothly. But the only thing missing for that type of resource is the state of charge optimization. So the participant has to optimize the state of charge by themselves. But that actually gives them a kind of platform or kind of framework to provide all the services to the market. And then with the FERC Order 841, we are in the process actually implementing the ESR, the electric storage resource model. So that one is really, it's a advancement from all these previous models, based on this kind of current the technology of the storage. So the goal is also to allow them to provide all the service, and also have a offer platform for them to submit all these characteristics, including the state of charge parameters. But we're not going to optimize state of charge. However, in the real time, they can send their current state of charges through telemetry. Then clearing we can account for this to make sure we will operate within this limit. And then that's the main kind of market enhancement directly related to storage. But on the planning side, MISO also recently build a market rule to allow storage as a transmission-only asset. They can participate in the transmission planning process or the competitive transmission process. And also, over the years, MISO introduced the new market products. For example, the ramp capability product, that's a 10-minute product, and then 30-minute short-term reserve product. Those products intended to incentivize flexibility to manage the increased variability and uncertainty with this renewable penetration. And then this actually provide the opportunity for this flexible resource such as storage to provide this grid service. So these next two slides are really just trying to summarize what the new ESR will look like. So basically for the ESR model, we in the energy and the energy service market, they can have 3 modes, like a charging, charge, discharge, continuous mode, but then it can also be offline and then provide offline response, offline reserves. So that basically can cover all these different operating modes of storage, and also hopefully in the end it can also consolidate. We'll be able to consolidate all these previous models, into this single ESR model to capture all of the different operating modes. And then also, as I mentioned, that we're not going to manage a set of charge, but we allow participants to submit the offer and the telemetry to tell our ISO about their current state, and then we'll kind of reflect all this in the queuing engine, not to violate these operating parameters. And then also the ESR actually is qualified as capacity resource. MISO actually has this called use limited resource in the capacity market construct, but we do require this minimum of 4-hour consecutive operating requirement. And then, so next is the grid connected storage at MISO. So currently we only have about 37 megawatt battery participating. It's mostly as ER2, but after we introduce the ESR, we anticipate, probably more and more of this new battery or new storage will probably participate through the ESR. And then we have this pump storage resource in the system from the very beginning. So there are 2 large pump storage plants with about 2,300 megawatt capacity. Just similar to ISO New England, participants actually manage 1 to pump and 1 to generating. So they kind of submit through their offer. But we do have the maximum daily energy constraint we can enforce for the generating mode. And then in real time, the participants are mostly risk averse, and then the real time mostly just follow their day-ahead schedule. So of course, it's not the best way, to leverage the flexibility. But in the meantime, participants also are very careful, not to violate their state of charge across the entire day. And then there's a growing interest in the solar plus storage. So in 2021, MISO interconnection application is record high. And then actually the first time the storage application surpassed wind. So we have about 12 gigawatt, 131 project in the queue. So, and there also a significant number of projects on the hybrid. It's mostly solar plus storage. And then, of course, there's still a lot of kind of uncertainty on the growth of the new technology. So I also worked with stakeholders to, look into the future scenario. So there are 3 different future scenarios built. So in the future one, there's probably not significant the storage in this model, but in the future 3 with the electrification, and overall it has a much higher capacity, and then also much higher of battery, in the future 3 scenario. And last year, we also worked on the markets of the future report. So that one just analyzed this future trend and then to evaluate what's the pain point, right? So what's the area need to be improved for the future market? So you can see there's quite some area related to this future resource like DER, hybrid resource, and storage. So this report also, kind of this graph outline when this will become a critical point. We really need to address this issue before that. In the early session, there's a discussion about the invert-based inertia or fast frequency need. So we can see like in the time frame like 2030 and after, we probably will start to see this kind of issue with more and more penetration of invert-based resources. But of course, all these will depend on how fast the grid will transition to future 1 and future 3. And then, even though currently we don't optimize the state of charge, on the R&D side, we did some study and a prototype on how storage optimization may impact the market clearing, and also what's the economic benefit. So we actually, first of all, build this optimization model in the market clearing process, and then just prototyped, and then also try to model a battery paired with this current renewable, and to see what kind of benefit this battery can bring to the market. And then overall, we see potentially, $53 million per year savings in the day-ahead optimization. But of course, it will increase the computational difficulty. So in general, this battery will require some binary variable because of the state of charge and round trip efficiency. And it will increase the size and number of variables and the overall solving time. So that this is the area we really need to focus on, to address this computational difficulty. And then, but in real time, there's even more interesting problem, like Tongxin just mentioned. In real time, normally the clearing window is short, right? You don't see the entire day, and then so you don't want to, just use this use energy limited resource, based on current information. Maybe it's better to use that for the future, while we don't really have the information. And on top of that, the future also has a lot of uncertainties, right? Even if you can forecast the price signal information is not going to be perfect. There's a lot of uncertainties built into that. So in terms of hybrid resource and batteries, there's a fundamental question of who should optimize what, right? If we have all of them in the in this large market clearing model, it's definitely introduced a lot of computational difficulty. And if especially if it's a very small resource, normally it won't be optimized very well, because normally there's some optimization gap in current kind of optimization solvers. It will take a long time to solve the zero gap. Normally, the market don't clear at zero gap. And so the current strategies like we start with optimizing by participant, and then try to leverage the existing resource types. Then we can learn more about the capability and performance of this new resource, and including how well, the storage owners can optimize this resource on their side. And in the meantime, we'll continue the computational research. There's some kind of relatively lower hanging things we can improve on the market rule. For example, the study indicates a more frequent adjustment of real-time offer will allow the storage to better reflect their capability in their offers, and then to provide better value to the market. So with that, it ends my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your interesting presentation, Dr. Chen. I'm going to check if I have any questions here on my end. Few questions.
Okay.
So when ISOs contract for support and it comes from BSS, do they constrain or restrict when the recharging can happen so that the activity doesn't create another grid issue and forecasting can be more controlled?
Right now, because the state of charge will be managed by the participant, right? So right now we don't explicitly consider that, but I think participant, for example, in the ESR model, participant can adjust their kind of status, right? Charging, discharging, or continuous, just to reflect their capability and availability.
Thank you, Chen. Another question is there any activity in using local distribution companies for being dispatchers of distribution embedded DERs to help the ISO market and also use the DER for lower cost non-wire alternative solutions?
I think we do have this DER model. Tongxin mentioned about this order 2222. So I'm also is in the process, for the compliance filing and basically have the plan for the implementation. So I think that will kind of definitely include all these distribution connected storage and I think I also mentioned we have this kind of storage as transmission kind of alternative, right? So I need to look into whether the distribution side of this storage can be part of it. Yeah, but right now I'm not 100% clear, sure, whether this distribution storage can also be part of that, kind of a transmission alternative rules.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Chen. Dr. Zhang, do you have anything to add based on these two questions? I also wrote them in the chat for panelists and organizers, if you want to read them.
Sure, I can just add my thoughts here. I think you all mentioned that. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I think it's a good question. As you all mentioned that we actually filed to the FERC for order 2022 for the DERs, which is distributed energy resource aggregation. So for distribution, for the local utilities, if they want to be part of that aggregation, I'm sure, they can, but the storage can be part of that aggregation and it can be managed by the distribution utility, basically. But however, under the current construct, I believe the distribution utility will be only the one that, they only play the role of, I would say, monitoring operation, monitoring the distribution system only, rather than participating to the ISO market directly. So I believe that's the current construct. I'm sure that the distribution, if energy storage resource want to offering retail, whatever you call the distribution services to them, that will be not, regulated by by FERC, which is not regulated by the wholesale market. So that will be a separate, setup. Probably going to be regulated by the state in the United States. Then the other question, I think you also mentioned that, whether that can be considered as a transmission alternative. I think that's still under discussion. That's just my 2 cents there. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Chen, Dr. Zhang, for the presentation as well as answering the questions. I don't see any additional questions. If someone has any comment or quick questions, feel free to raise your hand. I'll let you speak by allowing you to self-unmute. Otherwise, I think we can adjourn session A. And to do that, there's just a few more things that I'll share on my end. Let me just share my screen here. Okay, so we finished the general Q&A session. Closing remarks about session A. So, session A looked at experiences at North America. We had TSOs, ISOs, we also had manufacturers and consultants, and it was nice to see the various perspectives on BESS. We looked at pilot projects, we answered some technical questions with regards to efficiency, regulations, and other interesting parts. Paulo and the ICPTech team, if you have any quick closing remarks from your perspective, what are some of the areas or trends that you were able to spot just from today's session and over and above, generally speaking, in the electricity market? And yeah, Paulo, I see that you are here.
Just kind of final comments. We could see that this is a evolved technology with a different experience across the different ISO and markets, and of course many challenges in order to have a better stage of development. But the development is occurring at a high speed rate. Therefore, I appreciate very much the different experience and cases, and I'm sure we covered what we intended to cover in this webinar. To have a portfolio of experience, different perspective. So I'm very happy with the final output. Thank you all for contributions.
Thank you, Dr. Paulo Barbosa from ICPTech. The rest is just to remind everyone who is not part of CIADI or not familiar with CIADI that you could use the slide deck attached to the GoToWebinar to check upcoming events and interest groups and other workshops and so on. And that was it for session A. Again, thank you guys so much for your time. I know it's been a long journey. Especially thank you for the ICPTech team for helping supporting this event, for all the speakers and the subject matter experts that helped us organize this event. As a reminder, this is not the end of this event. It's just one session out of 3, in fact. So session A1 and A2 took place today. And part B, it's essentially going over 2 dates at the same time. In terms of North American time or Eastern, we will have the event today from 5 to 8:30. I can only imagine that it's very difficult for you guys to sit in, but all of that will be recorded and will be available in the CIADI portal, not just for the TPO members, but for all CIADI members. Anybody who would like to get access to it outside, please send an email to the program teams and we'll be happy to see what could be done. But session B, to look at the Australian experience as well as South Korean, will take place at 5 to 8:30 Eastern time or GMT plus 11 Sydney time from 9 a.m. to 12:30. Thank you guys very much. And another session from Europe on day 2 will take place 8 to 12 Eastern time or 1 to 5 o'clock in the PM GMT time. Look forward to see you in the next sessions. Any questions that you might have for the presenters today or for upcoming events, don't hesitate to contact me at ari.kellenson@ciadi.com. Thank you guys and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.